change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
What exists, reality itself, is gorgeous. It is the plenum, the fullness of total joy. The universe is a celebration. It's a fireworks show to celebrate that existence is. Wowee.
For those of us seeking a life of meaning and purpose, capturing fulfillment in every moment of now, seeking the truths of our reality so we can live this life to its fullest. This is the Live This Life podcast. And I'm your host, Hugh Cummings. I'm here to inspire you to ask yourself the question every day. Are you living? Or are you killing time? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode. And I have my good friend, sound healer extraordinaire. I'm going to call him former guitar god because he's moved on to his other areas of expertise. But my Obi-Wan Kenobi, my good friend Ben Carroll. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
Heath, it's so awesome to be back for my fourth time.
Fourth time,
and it's been just over 2 years. We just looked it up. It's crazy. Yeah. I still own some guitars.
You still play them?
I still teach guitar 2 days a week.
Do you really?
Yeah. Do
you do like the online stuff or in person?
Oh yeah, I've been teaching online guitar lessons strictly, no in person, since 2009.
Wow.
I was ahead of my time.
Maybe one of these days I will actually free up some time in my schedule and take actual lessons, because I love playing guitar. I started doing my own, but I definitely need a good teacher. And knowing that, I got probably one of the best teachers right here, right now, who still teaches.
Yeah, I do. I've actually, this October, it will be my 29th year teaching guitar, which
is
amazing. Freaking crazy. Because I'm 46. I started when I was 17.
Right. So how's life down south? I know you moved last year to a bit of heartbreak for me and Sylvia, because we started becoming good friends with you and Janine, and you guys headed for warmer pastures. That's for sure. How's life down in Georgia?
It's great. Let me tell you how much I regret it. How much I regretted it on January 25th, when I looked out the window and the daffodils were coming up. That's how much I regret it. We had our windows open here for like 4 months straight before summer, like literally like open 24/7, like for like 4 months. It was so beautiful. Right now it's a little warm, but it's in the 80s and 90s. It's no different than Maine would be on some days. It's probably 10 degrees warmer a lot of times. But yeah, love it down here. I've met some amazing people. Big change, but really it was time to get out of Maine. I loved Maine. I was there for a decade, met some amazing people, played a lot of studios around there doing sane healing. And it was really like the place where I had my massive reawakening, met so many people, but it was time. I was feeling that call to move someplace. It was almost like, being compelled to get out to someplace new, to build a new bubble and create some new fun resonance. So yeah, we've been here for 14 months now, and
loving every minute of it, right?
Yeah, the winter, the fall and the spring are amazing because it's just beautiful weather. So yeah, it's great. You got to come visit.
Yeah, that's the benefit of it, is that we lost you guys locally, but now we've got somewhere to travel, because we're also starting to like branch out our horizons and do things a little differently. Like this year has definitely been that lesson of growth, of how much things are shifting and moving in so many different ways. That's pretty much the gist of everything I wanted to talk to you about today, because there's so much changing in the world. And I don't know about anybody else who's looking at things, but I'm definitely feeling it. And I know a lot of the people that I have these types of conversations with are definitely feeling it as well. But yeah, the shifting, not only the shifting, but the recognizing and integration of it is just, it seems like it's been the theme. And I know with some of the email blasts and the videos that you send out too, it's been a common thing that you've talked about a lot this year too. And I don't know where you want to dive in on some of that stuff, but how has, I guess, the crossroads of your life where you kind of decided to pack up and move and make that huge change, like what was the thought process like, and how do you go through such a huge shift in your life? And I guess, how can you compare that to what other people have gone through recently that you might have seen? Like, it seems like it's a thing that seems to keep popping up for people.
You just relocating?
Yeah.
I mean, it was actually, it actually wasn't that big of a deal, I guess. We were talking about before we started rolling how I've been a recluse for the last year. I've been in a bit of a hermit stage, but I think I might have been in a bit of a hermit stage before that, because really the move wasn't that hard, minus the fact that it was a 2-day drive. That was intense. Other than that, it was just like a move. I got my beautiful studio space. I got a much bigger studio here, which is amazing. And it really wasn't that bad. And that maybe, I have the luxury of, I've literally been to every state except for Alaska. Most of those, half a dozen plus times, some of them a lot more, doing all the touring. So a lot of people would always ask me like, oh, wow, you moved to Georgia? What's it like being in the South? Like they think it's going to be like crazy, but people are the same everywhere. That's what I found after being on the road for so long. People are people, even the political views, it doesn't even come up. It's like, I think that so much of that feels contrived, like we're kind of duped into, especially after moving and hearing all these people's reactions and experiencing it firsthand, and it being like zero, like no kind of culture shock at all. For me, you'd have to ask Janine, who hasn't traveled as much as me, but I don't think she's really feeling it either. But yeah, people are people. Some people are freaking amazing no matter where they live, and some people are dicks.
Yeah. I know, like regionally, with the way that, I guess some of the pandemic stuff went down, though, it was definitely different regionally, but luckily you guys kind of went down there once that was all over with. There were some places like where we're from up here. I mean, we went to visit you guys up in Maine. I was expecting it to be way more loose because the majority of the state of Maine seemed to not be so restrictive. And then just the tourist area that we went up to go visit you guys, and it was like, oh wow, this is like just being like in Massachusetts. It wasn't that much different. And Massachusetts is its own unique, I won't even dive into it because it gets a little too political, but I think down south it was a little bit more loosened up when it came to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we weren't here during the brunt of it. But it seems like it was like not a big deal here. It was a big deal in Maine. I guess that's one of the things that was kind of like the last straw, like the last motivating factor.
Yeah.
I don't know how deep we want to go into that side of things. I don't know.
I'm not afraid anymore. I mean, honestly, I have to be honest. Like during a certain portion of starting off this show, you kind of like, you almost didn't want to like offend people. And I definitely don't want to offend anybody. I'm still not on the mindset of just being like, well, screw you. Here's what I think about this. But I guess I'm a little less worried about how people are going to react to certain stuff. And I kind of see myself as more of a mirror. If they don't like what I'm projecting, the mirror might be, the mirror reflection might be something they want to look at themselves. Because I don't think I've ever heard anybody's belief, no matter how different they've been than mine, where I've been deeply offended by their beliefs. And I think that is like the core of how much introspection we all should be doing on a regular basis. We really should all be approaching things from that standpoint, unless their beliefs are extremely, I guess, intrinsically damaging to us. Like if someone just said, I don't like heterosexual white, Italian guys who wear glasses and have a podcast whose name is Heath, I'm going to be like, well, I kind of have a problem with that, but
I mean, especially
another guy like that I should talk to. But
yeah, well, I don't want to dive into this for too long, but I definitely want to say that I have a strong problem with anybody telling me I have to do anything my whole life. That's the way I was born. And I was also raised going to a holistic doctor. Going to a holistic doctor. I was raised on a farm where we raised most of our own food. So I was never like in the medical system and being kind of like feeling like I was forced to put something in my body that I did not want to. I was never going to do it to begin with because of the way I was raised. It just, my programming is different than most people. It's not just, I'm not an anti-vaxxer by any means. I'm a free willer, all straight up 100%. But yeah, when I literally, there was one event that I had in Portland, which I had to end up canceling because they were requiring people to have that, which we shall remain unnamed. He who shall not be named, Lord Voldemort, or the other V. So I was like, I can't do that. And yeah, Maine was, I grew up in a liberal household, and it seems like what the definition of that seems to have shifted drastically over the past 3 years. But we'll just leave it at with diving into more fun things, because this has been so killed in the past 3 years. We'll leave it at, free will. Yes. You do what you want to do, and I will support that as long as you're not hurting anybody else. And I will do what I would do, and I have my own code of morality, which I think that would line up with anybody that came into contact with me, whether you are, whether you're Democratic, Republican, Islamic, Christian, whatever you are. I think we could hang and be cool, no matter what it's that when you have that vibrational resonance of just being in a good state of resonance. That's what it's all about. It doesn't matter what the beliefs are. The beliefs are just programmed into us. At this point, it just seems like they're there to fuck with us. Yeah, they keep us separated. Yeah, I've like I said, moving down here opened my eyes. Like it's like all the people that said like, "Oh, you moved there? What's that like?" Like they were expected it to be like some horrible thing, and it's like it's no. Other than those couple things we talked about, the slight political differences and those kind of beliefs, that was actually different. Supposedly, I wasn't here during that time, but people are cool. I don't know. It's weird. It definitely seems manipulated and contrived.
It does. I mean, I can see the friction from where I'm at this point of view, where I am currently. This state is very, very polarized when it comes to different things, and I'd like to just hammer home what you said about the free will, because I actually have an episode coming up on this at some point, because it's been hot on my list, because I feel like free will is, they say free will is fundamental, but I mean, I think that free will is so absolutely fundamental. I think it's fundamental down to literally the philosophical concepts of God. Like free will is necessary if the universe put us here as like the nerve cells on the fingertips of the hand of God. If we're out here to gain experience and be those nerve cells of basically feeling emotions and whatever else we experience in this life, and almost taking that energetically to report that back to the source that we're all connected to, you need to have a sense of free will. If everything was prescribed, if you're being told what to do, when to do, then you don't have free will. And I think that if more of us honored each other's free will and choices and left the stuff behind that literally does not affect us directly, this world would be so much more of a harmonious place. But I completely agree with you that I think a majority of that kind of stuff is just so manipulated. Strings are pulled from so many different directions, and it's the great thing about what's been going on, though, by the extent to which strings are getting pulled, is that I think more and more people are realizing it, especially the people that I had written off at some point that might not ever realize it, and they're starting to all wake up, and that's extremely encouraging for me, because I was starting to feel like we're a lost cause. Like humanity's going for another reset. It's the only thing we got. Someone's gonna hit the reset button and shake the snow globe up, because we're screwed.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing, and I had a really interesting perception of it in about 2014. I was doing a lot of group work where groups were, and this is pre-sound healing, before I was doing sound healing events. I was holding space in through a group of people that were doing all the stuff that I don't want to get into, but we were doing a lot of stuff where we were getting together, intentionally trying to shift resonance and shift timelines. And I could see that stuff starting to pattern out. Like that's when I first started really noticing it. But at the same time, there was a group of us that were really getting together and trying to create these shifts, doing it in groups of people, harvesting that energy and seeing it reflected out into the world. It comes back to our perception of reality. Is it, we're kind of, as we're trained to be in this world, we're trained that that the physical reality is what is here in consciousness arises out of that, and we have to work within the limit of construct of what physical reality is. And that's kind of what we've been working with for quite a long time, back through recorded history. Whether it's true or not is another story, but who knows? I'm just saying, I don't know. I don't trust anything anymore.
Very
but
true.
We're getting to the point where, and I've had this click in me a long time ago about, physical reality actually arising out of consciousness, and which is another whole story. But in this day, pop culture, things like the law of attraction and all this stuff is people are starting to touch on things of that. And then also from the scientific perspective, and I heard you talking about this recently on a podcast, with things like the double slit experiment, and like with the stuff with Dr. Emoto and intention, and how intention is shifting, with water specifically in that, but how we're proving, especially on the quantum level, that our thoughts are actually shifting and changing our reality.
Mm-hmm.
And through my experiences with working with the stuff I was talking about, doing it with the group, when we get together and do that type of work as a group, we are so much more immensely powerful if we can just get together, face not necessarily the same direction, because maybe that's being all facing the same direction is fairly challenging these days, but just a similar direction. I feel like that is enough to create some massive changes. And, maybe popping open that can of conspiracy, maybe that's why that we're kind of being kept divided and at each other's throats, distrusting each other, and being trained into the perspective that we should be at odds because our beliefs don't match up. And if we were together, we would fight, where it's absolutely not true at all. Because if we all did come together, we could even just, 1% of the world, if we all came together looking a similar direction, I think we could shift things like that. We're always talking about these great shifts that are happening, that we're in the midst of, the energetic changing of this time. That is one event which I think would change everything instantaneously.
Absolutely. I mean, if you consider how much energy people put into fighting against certain things, and it's one of my favorite concepts ever that I've heard in several different circles, but how you'll find so many people who are protesting against something. And I think it was Mother Teresa, one of her famous things, where they wanted her to come to a rally. I think it was against the Vietnam War or something like that. They wanted her to come to a protest against the Vietnam War. And she said, no, I won't do it. But if you have a rally for peace, I'll be there. And it's the negative, like, I'm not going to be against this thing, but I will be for something else. Like having the mindset of friction that you're going to be battling against a certain something is that sense of division. But when you're for something, you're unifying with that cause. And it's like that I feel like is like, again, that's a foundational concept of that. But as you look at the larger scales of certain things, like, are you protesting against something that's actually going to cause some sort of method of change? Or are you going to rally for the opposite of the thing you're protesting against? Are you rallying for this other thing that you see as a positive thing in this world? And, it's one of the things I think that's discouraged me so much lately in some of the political stuff that I do, just on small scale, little small town things, but they're big scale as far as the town goes. I'm seeing so many people come to the table to fight against something, whether it's a raise in their taxes because we want to build something or whatever, but they don't come with a solution. They'll only come to battle, but they will not participate in, well, we have this problem and I understand you don't want this solution, but what's the solution you are proposing? That, I feel like that concept and that mindset worldwide, just on grander scales of things, if that were put in place of the battles and division that were there, I feel like we would unite so much quicker, and that snowball effect would end up happening so quick that I think the people who are pulling those strings, who are in control of literally everything, the media companies, everything else, they want to prevent that from happening. But the great thing I'm seeing is it's still happening despite their damnedest efforts, because they have manufactured, in my opinion, that pandemic and its extent and its level of fear that it produced, and a lot of the statistics and so many different other things were definitely overblown and manufactured. And that goes right up into what I feel like what's happening with the whole alien disclosure thing too. Like I feel they're trying to make people fearful of it. Like, but what comes after aliens, Ben? Like I feel like this is the end game. Like what gets more serious than them?
That's like the Hail Mary. Yeah. To quote one of our mutual good friends who was just on your podcast and you were just on his podcast, Brendan Thomas,
the
lizard turds.
The lizard turds. He says that more often than I think I realize.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, so going back to what we talked about 2 times ago of where we really talked about the raising of the consciousness of this time, it really is like a last ditch effort, because I think regardless of how much they try to manipulate us, and we have been heavily manipulated in so many ways. I've had some really massive awakenings to that stuff in my teenage years, and then again in my around 2012, I started really waking up. Especially 2014, I had a really dark night of the soul where I started to realize that the whole basis of my consciousness, a lot of it is a false structure, a false matrix reality, I think is how Amy Belair, have you been on her podcast yet?
Not yet, but she's amazing.
Yeah, she's amazing. So much of the structure of my reality were based on these things that were not true. So when you take that away, like it's difficult at first. That's why it's a dark night of the soul. It's difficult because first of all, when you start to like pull that stuff away, a lot of panic starts to come up. In my experience, like I had a lot, and this is coming off of a really amazing experience that I had in the summer of 2014, which I believe we did talk about at one point. But as I went through that amazing experience, I went through a dark night of the soul afterwards where I had all these realizations. But it was actually the dark night of the soul that made me realize that those were the cause of that. But having the structure that's been in the structure for my state of consciousness that's been ingrained into me and trained into me by going through so many years of school and just having to survive in this society, coming to the realization that it was all false or a lot of it is false, puts you in a tough place. Ultimately, a much better place, but
yeah,
I think you've probably been through some very similar things.
Very, yeah. And the Dark Night of the Soul is no fun. What do you feel like was the general theme around yours? Because I can point to 2 different significant ones in my life. Which the weird part about it was they were 7 years apart. The 7-year cycles that they talk about in some philosophical circles. Mine were 7 years apart, and the 7 years from the last one is the year that Mason, my son, turns 18, graduates from high school. So it's like, oh boy, I can see this one on the horizon. And
wait, when's that?
25. So
25. Okay, that's coming. Wow, he's getting old.
He is. He's going to be 16 in a couple of weeks. So,
nice.
But what was the theme around your Dark Night of the Soul when you went through it? If you even want to talk about it, was because I know that you've gone through like the shifts of the rock and roll world wasn't, I think, everything you thought it was going to be. I mean, we were kind of talking about that last night with the whole group that we were in, but like you dream about this thing your whole life in your childhood, and then get out there and you realize that sleeping in a tour bus and not having any freedom and living that hard life.
Not having a shower.
Yeah. Like, so was it that, or was it something else? Like what was the general theme of that Dark Night of the Soul? Like what did you go into and what did you come out of it with?
In 2014, it was completely different because I kind of went through that in 2009, 2010 because Raw stopped touring. We did our last like lengthy tour in 2008. We toured a little bit in 2009, 2010, 2011. That was my first post Rockstar rock bottom because I literally went from having a house and in a yard and going out and doing tours and being in a relationship. All of it crumbled at once. Like of course, very coincidental, it all crumbled at once in retrospect, but it all crumbled at once. And I started just exploring a lot of different things, and that led me to ultimately to where I am now. But in 2014, I had already started, I had a couple of years of spiritual pursuits, not religious pursuits, but spiritual pursuits, working with group energy, not with sound yet, working with some sound on myself, but not with groups, but working with shifting resonance, shifting timelines, like what I was talking about in the beginning. That had been going on for a couple years, and I had an amazing awakening experience in the summer of 2014, which I'm pretty sure we talked about. Amazing experience. I don't remember what episode we talked about that on, so I don't need to dive too back into it, but I just had to go very briefly, I call it, in retrospect, I started calling it a micro ascension experience, because I had 9 days where I was here in this world with the same people I was always with, but I was like in a different level of reality, having a completely different experience, 100% total, complete different state of consciousness, although I still had, as much memories as I have now intact for this lifetime at that point. And that massively shifted my perception, and my state of consciousness shifting like that, expanding like that. And this is one of the things we wanted to talk about, so it's a good segue. Actually, when that happens, we shift our state of consciousness. As our consciousness opens up, it doesn't go back. What happens is we create, you can look at it as we create more space in our consciousness to hold more, to have a broader perspective, to access the multidimensionality of existence. But what also happens is, as you expand, all that denser energy, all that shit that we accumulate starts to have room to come to the surface. So a lot of times what happens, I've noticed with people, because I do a lot of energy work with people for the past decade, we raise our vibration up and we feel amazing, but then it feels like it crashes, and we're like, what did I do wrong? Why am I having this horrible experience? I thought I had it all figured out. What I've come to see is, as we expand our consciousness and it stays that way, that stuff starts to come to the surface. And that is actually a good thing. It's not a constant evolution of moving forward, constantly going up. It's expanding, releasing this stuff, having it be able to be transmuted so you can expand more. So it's more of like an upwards cycle, or an upwards spiral, that rather than a straight line. And having the understanding of that changed the way I view all these denser things coming up in myself and in others immensely, because I'm like, oh, you got a lot of shit coming up right now. Nice, man. You're doing some good stuff. You got it going on. You're figuring it out, because because in retrospect, also, I realized that all the stuff that happened to me that was absolutely horrible, like in 2009, 2010, when Raw stopped touring and I stopped having income, and my relationship broke up at the same time, and I ended up living at my mom's house for a while, from being a rock star, and it was horrible. At the time, I was like heartbroken and bank broken. And in retrospect, that was actually a great time of growth at that point, and it set the fertilizer in place for some massive growth that happened really from 2011. I started having inklings of awakenings, like reawakenings. 2012 was about that a lot. And in 2013, I was just my like job became the spiritual work. And I think that's when you started seeing my posts in 2012 and 2013 that you were talking about, that you've talked about in the past. And by the time 2014 came, I had just been doing, it was like my day, it was like my job. It was all I was doing. I was working with people, working with what I was doing, a bunch of us doing it together. And I had that massive experience all at once. My consciousness expanded quite a lot, but it released the massive experience of expansion brought a massive experience of release, which was a very large dark night of the soul that happened in the fall of 2014. And a lot of it was based around finances. You know, that was a lot of what I was panicked about, not having enough money, because I hadn't, you know, I literally from 2012, 2013, 2014, I was so focused on the spiritual pursuits. I was only teaching guitar like 2 days a week, and that was my whole income, living very frugally, which was great until you hit that dark place where you're like in panic, like, oh, I don't own a house. I don't have a savings account. What am I doing? Seeing all my friends, like they have houses and nice cars and, you know, have a family. And I'm like, oh, in just that societal programming of like, I don't have the right stuff. Yeah. I don't have the stuff that I need. Never mind that I can say this now because it feels like a different lifetime. I had been like massively successful, and a lot of people would probably think I was the most successful person that they knew, but I felt like such a failure. And I feel like that's one of those things that are ingrained into us to keep us down. And that was starting to come to the surface. Like, that's not the stuff that matters. And something that I distilled it down to a meme around that period of time, which is, you know, what if our highest level of value, our currency, was actually our level of consciousness? What would that world look like? You know, and that's when I had that realization that not only are we tricked into placing all of our manifestation skills into a middleman, which is the finances, which, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against money. I enjoy having it and spending it and living life. And I do a lot of things to make it because it's an easy medium to exchange. But if that's the goal, I feel like that is a trap, and you get trapped in cycles of greed, which you can see reflected out into the world so heavily, with people having enough money to live 10 lifetimes, still in places of being in perpetual greed, to the place where it's like, it's troubling and disgusting, you know, that one person can have enough money to feed everybody in the world. And it's a tricky spot, because I've also come to realize, and just totally shifting gears, like here's a 180, but I've also come to distrust like open handouts as well. So it's like a tough place. We need to find, like, I don't trust like the government having like the basic income. I don't, just because, like, what do you have to do to get it?
Yeah.
I don't, if it was like altruistic, yeah, but like I said, total 180, just like, we're just on a different road now. But backtracking from the 180. But yeah, the dark night of the soul, it was about a whole lot of shit, but it was really manifested through the fear of not having enough finances, through the programming of not having a house and not having, you know, the $50,000 car and all that, which I felt like at that point in time, I felt like I should have, because I you know, sold hundreds of thousands of albums and had you know, I was seeing the cage that I was in, and I was ultimately able to get out of it. And through that, I started maneuvering into what I'm doing now, which is the sound work that I've been doing for the past 8 years or however long it's been.
Isn't it amazing though, how they may not necessarily be things that we want. It may not necessarily be a portion of our life that we even want to adopt, but we feel like we have to have it just because it's some sort of a societal or family norm or something like that. You know, I know people who are, you know, they have more kids maybe than they wanted to have, or, you know, they have to, you know, the career thing's kind of cliche. You know, some family members have a legacy of, you know, medical or firefighters or whatever, you know, they feel forced to go and do something. And I can relate to so much of what you said so much, because I think my early career choices were not so much forced on me, but it was like almost like at a certain point, I wasn't allowed to stop because there were so many eyeballs looking at me and kind of like pushing me forward. But you know, I've talked about it so many times, so I hate talking about the same stuff over and over again, but I feel like I know exactly what you're saying about how you, I guess, feel like you're supposed to be somewhere, but then you go through that shit and dig, and then you realize, like, you know what? I don't think I even wanted to be there. So what the hell am I worried about not being there for? I'm not in a place that I don't even really give two shits about not being in that place. Like, I want to be over there, but I'm so worried that I didn't go over there. I'm going to go back towards that direction just because someone else is making me feel like I need to go that way. And I think you need to basically have that massive energy release and that breakdown that you're talking about, because I know exactly what you mean. I've gone through a couple of them, two different. One of them was like a phase of, who am I as a person? What is my mortality? What's it going to be like if I die? All that kind of stuff. And then the second one was like shifting out of that whole career thing. So it was like a whole breakdown of very fundamental, like, who am I deep down inside? And then on the backside of all those things, it was just, I guess, an expansiveness that I can't even describe. And I guess if you've never gone through it, you don't really know. But if you've gone through it, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, just from, my perspective of very different career, of being a rock musician, but it was like, why was I a rock musician? Because I liked music. Like, I didn't sit in my room and write songs. I was playing sounds and kind of traveling on the sounds, and I would do it for groups of people, friends in high school, just creating cool sounds and textures, and everybody just kind of tripping out on it. And that's what I love doing. But society was very clear that if you want to be a musician, you better write some songs to get them on the radio. Otherwise, you're gonna be working at McDonald's.
Yeah.
Pretty much. So I was like, all right, and I think we talked about that story the very first time I was on your podcast. But I was like, all right, that's got to be the focus. So that's what I'll do. And ultimately, it didn't make me as happy as I thought it should have. Don't get me wrong, there were some amazing experiences, and I've led such a beautifully bizarre life because I've had such experiences that are so out of the norm. Like, I've never held a day job. I worked in a warehouse for like a year at one point, part-time, while I was playing in a different band. But I've always just 100% been into what I'm doing and believed in myself and gone for it. But yeah, what I was going for was kind of disconnected from my reason for actually wanting to do it in the first place, because of what I had been told I had to do to get it. And I was always, not to complain, like, oh, poor me, I was a fucking rock star.
Hey, you poor thing.
I was never extremely happy. And like I said, don't get me wrong, I had some amazing experiences and did a lot of traveling and played everywhere. But ultimately, it wasn't what it needed to be. It wasn't scratching the itch of the depths inside of me of why I was here. Like, I didn't come here to be a rock star. It wasn't my dharmic path, but it was a very, very good way to get me working towards that direction ultimately. So yeah, stepping away from that was challenging, because like, I had a career and I was successful at it. And that's why when Ra stopped touring in like 2009, 2010, I was like, what am I going to do? Well, I'll start another band, because I don't know what the hell else to do. But I wasn't really into it. It just, like, I was doing it because I felt like I had to, and that's what people expected of me. And at the same time, I started exploring in more ambient sounds as time went on, and started exploring ultimately sound healing, and doing it for myself, but being mortified of sharing it with anybody, and going out there and doing it because I was a real musician.
Yeah.
I can't be doing that woo-woo stuff.
Right.
What do they think?
Yeah.
I spent so long building up, having a career. Why would I don't want to destroy that. And yeah, that was a thing. And even after I had been doing sound healing events like full time for a while, I still wasn't like really putting myself out there on social media, because it was still that stigma of like, I don't want to destroy what I had, even though I had already walked away from it. It's like that weird place of having a hard time letting go of something that society told you wanted. Yeah.
No, and I totally get that. Like, the one thing I wanted to to ask you about, because I'm looking at totally different career paths and stuff like that. But I look at sort of what my aspirations were a long time ago and reaching heights beyond what my imagination even pictured for me. I thought my life was going to go in a certain direction, and I ended up hitting highs far beyond that bar that I was even setting for myself. And that previous role, I did a bunch of cool stuff with the whole art crime thing. Like, I couldn't have told you I was ever going to do that.
Yeah.
So, then I start moving into
like they can make movies about you.
Someone actually said that. They were like, you should write a book about that whole thing sometime. I'm like, I don't know if I can. I don't know what part of confidentiality agreements and stuff, but maybe someday. But it even has me thinking of like all the way down to what am I doing right now? And I've got these I guess aspirations of grandeur. I would love to see this podcast just keep on skyrocketing. It keeps, every time I see stats, it's bigger and bigger. And so I'm totally honored for that. But again, like the conversation we were having we have this small little exclusive group of where we're me, Ben, and Brandon, and a few other people are bouncing some, where are we? What do we need to do to get unstuck? Heath, what is your challenges right now? And it was our first conversation of that kind of stuff last night in our little private group. And Ben was kind of the subject, like he was the one on the couch, but I'm sitting there getting all this value off of exactly what the other people in the room were giving Ben for advice. And I'm sitting there listening to it like, man, oh my God. And I had to sit with it, just like you said, like you had to sit and unpack a lot of that information. And so did I. So what I'm getting at it with is I'm like, okay, so what is it I actually picture my day and my life looking like in the future? And how does the road I'm on right now lead to that? And do I actually want that? Like you have to sit and actually think about what your dreams actually are. Like, first off, dream. Everybody out there, have a dream. I don't care if you've been a rock star, like what's your next dream, Ben? So like, that's what I'm getting at, is like, what does your next dream look like? And how bad do you even really want to call that in? Like, what does it look like when that dream comes here? Because if you pour enough energy into it, it's likely gonna come. More likely than not, if you pour your heart and soul into it, that energy is going to magnetize that thing right to you. So be ready for it.
Yeah. And I've really, the past, I have to do math in my head. The past 6 years that I've been doing sound healing full time, like as my main gig, have been the most fulfilling years of my life. Like I've had experiences going back to like when I was 17 that kind of culminated into like that, at least for this portion, that portion of my life, this portion of my life. That is why I was here, to work with sound codes in the way I am, to help people navigate these times of shifting, because I had a lot of information that I was talking about for years. Like you've heard me talk about at every event you ever came to, because I always just talk about somatics and how energies were shifting and how this time is a time of great change. And, it kind of felt like it at the time, but it was just like, it was something instilled into me, like that deeper knowing, like something is coming. And you go through times where you're like, I'm always talking about this, but am I just full of shit? Self-doubt. And then 2020 hits, I'm like, yeah, we're there.
Yeah.
We've been there. Things are shifting hardcore, and it continues to shift. Things started shifting from my perspective a lot in 2012. Things started to shift in 2013. It started to really cycle up in 2014 is when I had my own personal massive experience, and then kind of riding that wave and totally shifting who I was in that time, going into doing the sound work, working with people, working with energy, working with sound in ways so completely different than writing songs, and having so many people have such profound experiences, hearing about it and being like, wow, like half the time you're like, I don't even know what to say. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. And but kind of riding that wave of 2012 up until really this year, 2013, because in 2012 I remember a lot of times I would be feeling like I'd be sitting down to try and meditate, 2012, 2013, probably more 2013, and feeling like this undercurrent of almost, it's not anxiety, like I'm anxious about something, but like this jittery feeling inside myself, like something just like not being able to settle and feeling a little bit antsy. And And I've been feeling that again this year. I noticed it. Maybe it started last fall in 2022. I think I remember talking about it with Amy Belair. But I've been feeling that, and I recognize it from when I was really feeling it back then. And I feel like things are cycling up again, like with somatics that I've talked about so many times. How the pattern that we've been holding is starting to come apart a little bit. And I feel like I was going to say, and maybe it's just me, but I've heard enough people talking about it and corroborating what I've been thinking, that I don't think it's just me. But things are starting to, that pattern is starting to break up a little bit. Like the frequency is rising enough. Like if you're familiar with cymatics, and I know you've talked about it on your show many times, but I'll, in case anybody listening hasn't listened before, cymatics, one of the most popular ways of showing it that you'll find on the internet if you look it up, cymatics, is when you take a sheet of metal, attach a speaker to it, play pure tone frequencies through the speaker, vibrating the sheet of metal, and sprinkle some kind of sand or powder on the sheet of metal. And at specific resonant frequencies, these patterns form, and all of the particles are moving and flowing, but they're moving and flowing together, holding a very specific pattern. But as the frequency shifts, as it starts to raise up, the pattern starts to dissolve into chaos, at least what seems like chaos from our perspective here in this 3D reality. It's all the particles are moving without any relation, and it just looks like a chaotic mess until you get to the next frequency that holds a resonance, that a pattern just like snaps in, and you have another beautiful pattern taking shape. And to me, with that jittery feeling, I feel like that's what happened in 2012, 2013. And that was also a very potent time for a lot of other people. And it was also like, the whole Mayan calendar thing, but that's another thing. But it feels like we're on the cusp of another big change. And I just like feel that. And maybe, that's why I've been so hermity these past, since moving here, especially, because I'm just sitting with it, and I've been through it before. And rather than like being like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just settle down after, years of practicing meditation? Why can't I just settle down being like, all right, I think something's coming, and I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and keep offering things in the way that I am that will be in service to the shifting when the time comes when people need it, because I feel like that's also important. No matter who you are, no matter what you're doing, you can utilize what you already have in your life, what you already have as your job, in ways of service to helping other people to navigate these shifting times. And that, for me, it was always sound, vibration, always music. So I've been working on that, and it was just kind of like a directive. Why are you doing what you're doing? Is it because so many people? That's another thing. So many people hate their jobs, and that's so unfortunate. And I don't have any answers, because I certainly don't. I don't even feel like I'm qualified to talk about that, because I haven't always had a lot of money, but I've always, like, I have to do what I'm going to do, or I will die trying. Like, if I'm going to play music, that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to work a 40-hour-a-week job and try and play music. I'm going to play freaking music, and I'm going to live in the band's rehearsal studio, which I literally did with Ra, sleeping on a couch with cockroaches calling on me. Like, I'm in it. So I never got into a situation where I had a job that I hated and someone else had control over me. I always maintained freedom of my life. But I see so many people in that situation, and that's what people are asking about that a lot. Like, how do I get out of that? Like, I don't know. I feel like we're getting to a place with the resonance that we're holding as a society, where we're shifting, where so many people are finding ways to get out of that. So I think it's coming. I think, whether it's finding something completely new and finding that magical thing, moving into the thing that you've always wanted to do, maybe that's not even it. Like, the thing that I thought I always wanted to do didn't end up resonating the way I thought it would. It was actually something completely different, related, but when it comes down to it, complete opposite end of the spectrum. But yeah, why why are we here doing what we're doing? I think there's so many of us that are here at this time specifically to help at this time of shifting. And I know I am. I've known that since I was a teenager. Understanding galactic cycles was we talked about this in December of 2020 on this podcast about galactic cycles and being in a time where our whole solar system is in a place entered into an energetic cloud. We're in alignment with the center sun of the galaxy, where we're being subjected to much higher frequencies. And the way that plays out on a physical level, you can see it in the sun with all the solar flares that you see happen, human resonance of the planet shifting. But what it ultimately comes down to, those are the physical representations, but being that we're starting to understand that our state of consciousness is actually creating the physical world, you can understand that these shifting energies are actually shifting our state of consciousness. And that's why whether or not I have the answers for you, I can say probably why it's happening. I don't know to tell you how to quit the job you hate, but why it's happening is probably because your consciousness has expanded to a point where you're no longer feeling in alignment with the thing that you've been doing for so long as a means to make ends meet, as a cog in someone else's wheel. And to realize that we're all at a point where the shifting is happening. So even if you don't know what you're going to do, there's so many people in the same exact boat, the same exact position of feeling these changes, feeling this shifting, that there's a lot of tension around that. Ultimately, that bubble has to burst,
Yeah.
We can't have so many people feeling like slaves and having other people running around with billions of dollars and the freedom to do anything they want to go to Mars or whatever. Great, but it's so imbalanced. And I feel like, with this shifting of energies, that's one of those bubbles that is going to pop because it has to pop. And, one of the things I think about a lot, especially when I'm worried about it, is like, does this, because back in 2012 I was like, yeah, everything's shifting. 2013, 2014, like the whole world we're gonna be ascended by like 2015, it's all gonna be good. We're there, man. But
didn't happen.
But then you're still going through cycles, and like, how long does this process take? Does it take another 5 years? Does it take another 500 years?
Right.
I don't know. I feel like it's not going to take another 500 years, but that's also, I don't want it to take another 500 years. So, I feel like, but like I said, something big is on the horizon. And do we ever get to the point where we do feel like we've arrived? Because I don't know, maybe it's just always a journey and evolution of consciousness. When we're here, we're really refined down to a place where we're in such a dense state that our sliver of consciousness that we have available to us, filtering our oversoul consciousness, coming down to this little teeny speck of light, like, here's what you have the knowledge of. And now we're going to have this big expansion. Here's what you have.
It's still
expand out, like
still microscopic. It's interesting. Keep going.
Oh, I don't want to. Yeah, I want you to talk too, but I feel like that's what's going on right now, and that the experience that we're having here in this density is different from, we come here and we're behind the veil, so to say. But with the shifting, the veil is lifting, and that's why so many people are starting to channel and starting to download information, and that's like common speak these days. I started channeling or downloading information in the 90s. I didn't tell anybody. I was like, this is fucking weird. Like, I'm like having conversations and getting all this knowledge. And I wrote a really long blog post about that. Something that I had been apprehensive of sharing for many years back in the fall. I wrote a really long blog post about that, but I started getting all this information, and it was really weird. And I didn't talk about it for years, and I felt like I wasn't supposed to, but now, like, so many people are having these same exact experiences. So like, I feel like it's about time I got off my ass and started talking about it, because that's another thing we need to do, is open up to each other and share the things that are going on in our lives that are outside of the societal things that we've been taught that we're supposed to live within these little boundaries. When all the stuff is happening out here, it's time to open up and share that stuff without feeling like we're going to be labeled as woo woo or crazy. And I've stepped over that line far too many times to step back.
Yeah.
And I think you're starting to get there yourself.
I am, and that's one of the greatest. You said so much stuff that I want to definitely hammer on, but that is one of the greatest things I think that's coming out right now is that a lot of people, I think I've just said this even recently on this podcast to this episode right now, that people I might have written off that weren't ever going to get it in this lifetime, or, they're just not going to get it and they're going to have to come back and repeat it if that's what really happens, they're starting to come up with ideas, concepts, and everything else that completely shock me. People who I never thought would listen to this show, listen to it, and we talk about it. My father is one of them who I don't know if he necessarily listens. I think he maybe pokes into some of the stuff that I might post on social media or whatever, but definitely like gets some of the concepts, and just not one of the people that I think would be into it. But I think more of the life enjoyment type stuff are the things that I see him and other people sort of integrating. But even when it comes down to the stuff that is woo woo, I was so absolutely scared of that judgment. And especially when I first started this podcast, I didn't tell anybody about it. I mean, I think when you finally came on was the first time you came on was the very first time that I think that I had invited. I think I had a couple people on, but it was like one of the first times I had somebody on who I'm like, okay, if I have Ben on, you better be ready for that shit, because it's likely going to get in front of many more eyes and ears. So is this really what you want? Like that whole, what does this look like in the future? Because if you're going to call it in, you got to be ready for what that looks like. And it took me a while to integrate that. Like it really did. And it still was like I was shrinking myself down. And just like that conversation we had last night, what are you doing to hold yourself back? And a lot of the times it's us. Like the things that hold us back in our lives are exactly what you just talked about, was the fear of it being called woo-woo and everything else. But these conversations are becoming so much more mainstream. And because of that, I think more people are diving deeper into what our reality actually is, what life, what this existence, the reason why we were put in this meat suit for the amount of time that we're here. Why are we here, and what is it that we're doing? And when people do that, they're also digging underneath these false fences that the people who do have more money than they know what to do with and are manipulating the world. We're seeing those false borders for what they are, and we're going under them, over them, and around them. And that's happening more frequently, to the point where I think this, again, the whole thing with the alien stuff, I think it's an act of desperation, because it's like, why tell us now? Why admit after 70 years, 80 years that you've ruined people's lives, likely killed numerous people to keep the secret. And now all of a sudden, like, it's cool to talk about and shoot them down and,
that sounds like Hail Mary.
Yeah, it does. So, I guess what I'm getting at is like, things are absolutely shifting and changing, but for people to integrate all of this information and be not only okay with it and how that's going to be perceived. And again, I guess a shade of that whole, the world's telling me to go over there. This is kind of a similar thing. Like the world's telling you, hey, Ben, this is what it means to go be a rock star. It's the same thing where, hey, Ben, you're going to be woo-woo if you go over there. Like, okay, well, that's where I'm going, because this stuff fascinates me. And to live a life in a direction that's not that direction that doesn't feel good in here. It's not in resonance with me. And I think if more people sat down with what actually feels good, not what your family's telling you to do for a job, but what feels good.
And it's not, sorry to cut you off. I want to say this before I forget, like we were talking about before we hit record, like a lot of times I'll forget what I was saying.
Say it.
But the most important, and far more than what feels good, is what the combination of what excites you and terrifies you. Like 100% of the time with people that I've worked with or talked to, that is the path that ultimately like blows things wide open. Like, what? Oh my God, I want to do that. But fuck no, that horrifies.
That's this.
That's the path. That was me with sound healing, using my, like playing the bowls. Yeah, sure. Whatever. I could sit down and do that, but actually opening up and using my voice. I did that for myself for years before I ever did that in front of anybody that I didn't trust very intimately, because it was horrifying. And I also really wanted to. I felt like, I want to do that, but it took me a couple of years to actually to do it. And the only reason I did it was because I kept getting offered gigs to do sound healing, and all my other income dried up. Like this happened like I think I talked about this on a past podcast. I guess the more I come on here, I'm going to say that more and more.
There's some people that might not have listened to the previous ones, but we'll link them in the show notes so you can check out the other ones.
Yeah, I lost my own train of thought. But
you were basically funneled into this because your other means of income started drying up.
Yeah, all my guitar lessons, because I was still teaching 2 days a week for several years, like wholly focused on spiritual pursuits, on just finding paths of awakening and whatever you want to call it, whatever word you like to choose, and working 2 days a week, making just enough money just to survive and live my life comfortably enough to have all that free time. But all my guitar students dried up within like a matter of a couple weeks, which was quite synchronistic, because like a lot of them had been with me for years and years, and it was just like, it wasn't like they were like, I can't do this anymore. It was like they all had good reasons, and they're all like, I want to come back, I don't really want to stop. But it all dried up at once, and I kept getting offered gigs to do sound. And so I was just like, eventually I was just like, all right, I'm going to book some events and try doing what I do at home for myself in front of an audience. And that's absolutely horrifying. And I know how I work. So I'm going to book 3 instead of 1 in case the first one sucks. So I'm forced to do it 3 times to get a good feel for it. But and then they all went phenomenally well. And literally within a matter of a couple months or less, that was my main source of income. Well, I mean, I guess that wasn't very hard because all my income dried up, but it was actually, I was starting to survive comfortably on it. Like really quickly. It was like, it rolled right out and was very, very amazing in beyond just it working out. It was like, it was meant to be.
You know, and one other thing, it's amazing how everything that you've talked about. I mean, we talk a lot about these dates, like, you know, your dates are very significant to you, certain years and certain time periods. Like you'll never forget those for the rest of your life. And I can kind of remember similar ones with me, but you look at where your life was in those really tough moments, and you see in a very short turnaround of time, like how much better that's gotten. But in those moments, in those lows, it's literally the worst of the worst. And I think one of the main reasons why I wanted to start this show is because there were times where I had the worst of the worst years, and within a year, I'm literally in the opposite end of the spectrum away from where that was. And I'm doing something that if I would have just known a year prior that it was going to be this good just within a year, that low wouldn't have been so bad. Right. I mean, it was so many different times that that's happened. So it's like just one big thing that I like to put out there for people is that if you're in one of those lows, you're in one of those really nasty low down places, likely that energy is going to come and release at a very near point. And within a very short amount of time, you're in a completely different place. So, you know, all you have to do is open yourself up to it. You have to dream a little bit. You have to just be hopeful. Sometimes you just literally have to make it through the day that you're in and just try and get a good night's sleep and start again tomorrow, because tomorrow could literally be the day it turns around. And I've had this conversation with people who I've either coached all the way up to someone who I've literally pulled off the railing of a bridge back in the day and just said that, you know, tomorrow could be the start of the step up from the very rock bottom that you were in. And within a very short amount of time, you're at a high that you never could have dreamed of. But if you don't wake up tomorrow, that's never going to happen. And so most people who are at the end of their ropes, they feel like their dreams have fallen apart, whether it's a marriage, a job, just everything. It's like, okay, well, what a great opportunity you have at this point in your life to literally be at a point you'll never be at again, because you're at rock bottom and you got, you know, it could get worse. Like you could go blind on top of everything, you know, you can have a horrible accident and you'll like, things can always really get worse. Just don't welcome that. And your life can be so much better in such a short amount of time. And I will speak from the experience of myself, from Ben Carroll, from so many other different people who have said the same exact thing and been through these circumstances. Like, yeah, I don't ever want to go through it again, but man, I am so glad I did, because a very short amount of time later, my life turned into something I didn't know I wanted and couldn't even have dreamed of. And I'm so glad I'm there.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're there, um, I've been there, and some things that have helped me, which I'd like to share, are one, sit down every morning and write down 3 things that you're grateful for, and try and actually feel those things. You know, is as simple as your cats. Like, I'm grateful for my cats because they're really fucking hilarious. Or whatever it is, but start a practice of doing that every day, feeling grateful for that. And sometimes you might have to force yourself to it, but that will literally, just for those 5 minutes, that will literally start to shift your energy, and that will start to expedite the process of finding your way out of that dark night of the soul that you're in. um, I I firmly believe that that's definitely a powerful practice. It sounds so simple, and it almost sounds so cliche, like, oh, gratitude, but it's not the words about gratitude. It's actually the state of resonance that you hold,
Yes.
where like that's almost like being able to hold the state of unconditional love, which is a very, very high vibration. Feeling grateful for something in that way, just feeling gratitude that it exists in your life, opens something up within you, shifts your energy, and allows those pathways to connect in definitely a more expedited way. And the second thing is, another practice I did was watch for the negative thought processes. And I had a whole ton of them. And, being here in this density, I think we all always have that to a certain degree, but doesn't mean you have to have it to the extent that you may if you're in that place, like, oh, my life sucks. I hate this person just won't give me a break. Or, even less about someone else, but more about the things you're finding in yourself. Just what I did was I put together like a series of sentences, which I actually wrote down and printed out, and I think I have in my I know I have, because I've bumped into it many times in my desk still, where I would actually catch myself, be like, that's not something I actually want to be repeating to myself. And I would go through the list just saying it in my head. And I would do that. And it became like a habit. I had it memorized. I would be like, I would catch myself. And at some point, I was able to release a lot of those negative patterns, those negative thought patterns, because those are also holding you in a cycle of creating that negative resonance, of creating that reality. And at the same time, don't get me wrong, don't feel like you have to control every single thought in your life, because that'll drive you crazy in its own way.
Yeah.
It's just that when you're consistently berating yourself and telling yourself you're worthless, or stuff in that vein of things, like, you can at least go through the motions of saying things that you want to be true, that you might not feel are true in the moment, but replacing that, and that is a stepping stone to get some forward momentum towards releasing that. And it worked for me. I did that, and I did it very consistently, and of course not perfectly, because I'm still human as well. But I don't think you have to be perfect. You just have to. It's like driving a car. You're not always like straight arrow on the road. You're like, yeah, I'm in the lines.
Sometimes not.
Yeah,
Sometimes.
not. But yeah, I mean, you're never in a straight line. You're always, slight course corrections, and you don't even notice because you're still going the direction you want to be. Same thing, figuring out those ways to course correct.
I think the striving for perfection, it's I always set the bar really high. I set it really high for me. I set it really high for my team that works for me and stuff. It's okay if we don't get it. And I hate saying that, because I don't want people to have the expectation of like, hey, I'm going to set the bar up here, but don't try to reach it, because if you reach that bar and you go over it, like, oh my God, what an absolute amazing achievement if you were able to go over that bar. But if you're an inch underneath it, at least you got that high. If the bar was lower, you might not get it. And it's that whole, totally, brain's running on overtime now, but the guy, Roger Bannister, who did the 4-minute mile, the whole story about him, like, he broke that 4-minute mile, and within a year, a bunch of other people did it as well. But in the whole history of recorded humanity, nobody ever broke it, and they didn't think it was possible. But then as soon as the human brain discovered it was possible, other people did it. So setting that bar for perfection, it's like, it's a great thing to do. It's great to strive that high, but don't be upset if you're not there. You just try and do the best that you can to get to that bar or whatever it is that you're going to set. That's where I've kind of gone in my life. And it was like, yeah, damn, if you come a few inches within it, like, look how high you jumped, that's a great accomplishment.
Definitely. Don't forget to celebrate. Don't forget to live this life.
Yes. Celebrating. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that's the most important thing is to sometimes the best thing you can do is just remember how good it feels to just breathe and be alive. And that involves setting down all that crap. But if you can just breathe and be like, not think about the anxieties of the future or the soul crushing defeats of the past that are at this point only dreams. It's what's right here, right now. You're probably in a good place. If you're listening to this, I don't think you'd be listening to this if you were getting, chased by a bear or about to slam into a cliff in a plane. You're probably 99% chance or more. You're in a place where you're okay. You're doing well. And the biggest demons are the thoughts about the past and the thoughts about the future. And those are only dreams. If you can just set that down, tune in, take a deep breath, and just remember how good it can feel to be alive. That's really powerful. And that's another thing I had to relearn because I was very much trapped in my own hell of anxieties about the future and worries and thoughts of the past. But yeah, just breathe and be here.
And one of the best places to reach that contemplation is just literally sitting in silence. And I know you've said that you've been, in total reclusive mode in like the cocoon and stuff like that. And I kind of get it. Like I've wanted to be there myself. I guess, now that I actually think about it a little bit, I guess this summer I kind of have been. I had a couple defeats in a few jobs, and it was a great lesson to learn because I'll straight up admit that I was kind of a pompous ass where I'm like, I don't know what it's like to lose. Like just a lot of my ventures that I've ever had in my life, I've been very fortunate that if I wanted something and I put myself to it, it shows up and it manifests. I'm just that lucky. But lately, 2023 has been the year where I've applied myself to something and it was beyond my control and it didn't come to fruition, and some significant time investments. And I can think of a few times in my life where that's happened, but it's you just got to be okay with it. But I also, to be okay with it, I had to sit and look at what did the loss teach me, because then I could just process it, because you have to try and take the value in everything, even something as lucky as I've been, as I haven't really lost many people that were very close to me. I know at some point it's probably gonna come like a cascade. I hope not, but even if something as drastic as losing somebody, if that happens, you have to sort of see after the dust settles, like what was the purpose of their presence in our life, and how can I honor that by moving forward? It's one of the worst things that I think most of us can go through is the loss of somebody, but never mind something that drastic, just the changes in just losing something in your life as far as like a venture or something like that goes. Like, what did the process teach me so that you can not look at its negative value, but its positive value and impacting your life? Because it was, the famous meme, you've probably seen it, where there's two people driving in a bus, I think, and one guy's looking out over, they're driving on like a cliff edge going around a corner, and one guy's looking out the window that's right along the edge of the wall, and it's all dreary and there's spiders on this cliff hanging off, and the guy's all sad and it's dark and slimy and water dripping off it. The other guy's on the edge of the guardrail overlooking this gorgeous valley with the sunset, and it's like literally looking at this bus, and just if the dude looking out that slimy window just turned his head a little bit this way, he's looking at the same gorgeous scene as the guy sitting across the aisle. So it's a great metaphor for life, though. Like you can look at certain situations in your life as this one thing, or you can look at it as this one thing. Which one is going to torture the shit out of you? It's the one looking out that nasty view out of that window. So you can choose to, if you want to be there, but why choose that?
Yeah.
And that goes all the way up to the what ifs of all these crazy things that we talk about, like with Brandon Thomas and everything else. Like you can look at life that it's this boring thing where none of the mysteries that we're talking about actually exist. None of it does. And that sucks. All the other what ifs, they're all unknowns unless you literally can jump in a boat and waltz on down to Antarctica and walk right across that damn continent. And you can be for sure that thing is at the South Pole. There's no dome. There's no hole that leads to an inner Earth. There's no secret base down there that John Kerry and Obama and everybody else is going down there to visit. Like,
and we're going to go right from there to the dark side of the moon.
yeah, exactly. And if you can't prove that beyond a reasonable doubt, the mysteries of those things, they're literally just fun. They add to life a little bit more. But yeah.
But I agree wholeheartedly, 100%. You know, perspective is everything. The ability to choose how you react to things will change your life drastically. I think happiness is not something that happens to you, it's something you choose. It's not something that happens to you, it's something you choose. And I realized that somewhere along the way, not that I remember that every day, but I think enough to keep the car in between the lines, or at least on the road.
Just gotta keep it on the road. Just keep it out of the trees and the guardrails.
That, you know, just keep course correcting when I'm in the right state of mind. And we all have bad days and shit happens. And, you know, I'm lucky also that I haven't had any devastating losses in my life besides all my grandparents, but no extremely untimely, devastating losses. And I'm very fortunate for that. But, you know, we're all here on a journey into a space where we are forgetting ourselves. We're all here at this point in time because, you know, energies are shifting and we're actually literally starting to integrate the higher versions of ourselves. The veil's starting to lift. And as that happens, I believe we start to move more in tune with the higher version of ourselves, like our oversoul, whatever you want to call it, even by tiny increments. And those higher versions of ourselves, I think we never lose that, you know. So even if someone very dear to you passed, I firmly believe that a version of them still exists. It's not to say it's not tragic, because the very specific filters that are in place that cause that person to believe the things that they believe, I don't know that we always hold on to that. I think we can always access that, but having that as the wholly believed version of our reality, of this ride that we're on, that horrifying death grip on this roller coaster, I think we step away from that. But isn't that a good thing? Because then that person's in a place where they can looking like, I believe that. You know, I think there's so much more going on than meets the eye, and we're starting to get to a place where we're remembering that on a collective level, not just individual awakenings, but it's like popcorn, you know, like for the past, for always, there's been pops here and there, but as time has moved on, you know, getting into like the 70s and 80s, it started to pick up a little bit more and then you had like the Seth material and the law of one material and our consciousness getting seeded with higher stuff, and getting into, you know, 2012, a lot of stuff is starting to pop. You know, there's definitely a lot of action going on. Things are drastically different than they were in the 90s. There's so much more information about there. People are able to connect. And all this information is readily available at your fingertips, and it's just increasing as the energy rises, as the frequency keeps rising, or could say, to stick with the analogy, as the hot plate keeps getting hotter, more of those kernels are going to pop, and it's just going to, like, at what point is it just like, you know, I'm sure you've made popcorn. At one point, it's just like,
yeah,
and then the whole place is full of popped corn instead of little seeds waiting to be awakened. And I feel like that's where we are right now. Like it's happening. And even though I wanted it to happen quicker, like looking back to 2012, I might have said the same exact thing, but we're still, I think, so much further along than we were 10 years ago. It's still picking up because so many more people are getting there. Like you were talking about, people that you never ever would have thought in a million years would be discovering things like Reiki and sound baths and meditation. People are becoming aware of that. And, you know, like the law of attraction becoming straight up pop culture. which that's one step away from realizing that you're creating your own reality.
Yeah. The experiments that confirm all that stuff is really what broke it through for me, because I would hear a lot of that stuff about law of attraction and everything, but the more scientific experiments that come out, there's more people that are actually diving into it, more people that are, you know, they're PhDs and they're going into that. I mean, to the point where, what was it? Was it 20? I think it was 2022. There was Nobel Prize winners to reaffirm some of the stuff with the dual slit experiment and everything. So, I mean, it just hearing the concepts that have been around since the 90s. I mean, some of these people have been talking about this stuff for decades, and just with the advancements that happened, it confirms some of those things. And I think for people who had a very skeptical mind or looked at everything like woo woo, once they hear more of those substantiated scientific experiments leading down these woo woo roads and confirming it all, it's like, okay, well, what more of that stuff might be true as well? And if our consciousness is fundamental and the world doesn't render beyond our fingertips like a video game does, like we are the ones who are experiencing everything. And it all works that way, you know, simulation theory or not. Like I kind of don't bite into simulation theory, but yeah, I feel
far too simplistic. It's like our version of it. Like we understand simulation, we understand video games, so it's a good analogy, but the reality of it is so much more complicated than our human brain can comprehend. Because like me saying I'm creating my reality and I'm rolling out the version of that person doesn't mean I'm creating that person. It's that the reality that we live in is such a vast tapestry of creation, with all these points creating their own galaxies, their own universe. It's like, it's so far beyond what our little human brains can comprehend from a logical standpoint. But when we tune in, feel into it energetically with our heart, we know that it's true. You know, we've been talking about it in spiritual texts for millennia. And yeah, like you were saying, science is catching up. Science is catching up. And at this point, it's definitely beyond a shadow of a doubt. Like science has caught up as far as the cutting edge, or even far beyond that. But as far as like academia and the accepted and taught versions of it,
air quotes, accepted.
Very, very many air quotes. How long before that catches place? And that's, you know, the same with any shift. Like I'll butcher the quote because I don't remember who it was or what the quote was, but it like take someone loosely quote of someone who I can't remember. So I'll claim it. This is mine.
It's going to change so much as it is.
But you know, all the information is there. It takes about another 100 years for it to actually collect, to pattern out into the collective. But, you know, I think that we're already well underway, because a lot of these things have been going on. Experiments like the double slit experiment have been going on for decades.
Yeah, it's actually been about 100 years. I think that Niels Bohr and oh boy, see, this is another thing, effect of it being later in the day, but their experiments into quantum physics, I want to say, were in like the 1915, 1920 range. Like they started a lot of these things with their basic understandings back then. And of course, you have to look at the theories of relativity. That was like the cutting edge stuff, but theories of relativity all dealt with the big stuff. And then once they started looking deeper and smaller, that theories of relativity started to break down. It was a great basis, just like the Newtonian physics were just basically basis of understanding when it comes to the theories of relativity. And then the theories of relativity, they led up to what we believe in quantum physics. So who knows what the next level beyond, you know, the understanding of quantum physics is going to lead to. So, but it's literally been like 100 years worth of studying and having these philosophies. But as the, you know, stuff like the Hadron Collider and some of these other more advanced experiments go, like even one with quantum entanglement, and I've had that on a list of stuff that I want to do, but I need to fully like dive into the study of the quantum entanglement. But the general summary of it is they took the light from, I want to say, a quasar that left its home star, like it's about 1 billion light years away, and they split it on a prism on Earth. And once they've split it, once they managed to split the prism, they still were able to do the excitement experiment of when they split the photons from that thing, and were able to still have something react. And it was basically the light left its star 1 billion years ago, but they still were able to do something to have it react instantaneously. So they were still
quantum entanglement.
Exactly.
The action at a distance.
Yep. So they were, and it just blows my mind every time I talk about that was Einstein's best description of what he was witnessing. We call it quantum entanglement now, but the greatest mind of the time came up with the phrase spooky action at a distance, because he didn't know what the hell was going on with these small particles, So getting into these understandings about the universe and the way it works is what will, I think, eventually shift more of the skeptic's mind, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we are there. And, taking it back to the conspiracy stuff we were talking about at the beginning, I think we've been there for 100 years. We've had all kinds of technology that is impressive. I think a lot more people are well aware of that now. And that stuff's going to start coming to the surface very soon. I think you can only, maybe this whole, Project Bluebeam is the start for us actually seeing some of these technologies that have been suppressed so long, just air out all the shit. Like, all right, we all know you fucked with us for a long time. I'm willing to not be okay with it, but move on. Like, let's move on as a collective, and remember how to come together and stop trying to control everything and manipulate everything, and remember that we are so much more than that. Our consciousness is so powerful, and if we can just come together and be in a state of a little bit more of energetic alignment, this world will be such an amazing place to be. And I think we're headed that way. I know we're headed that way. And it's, again, like, I want it to be now, not even 5 years, never mind 500 years. And we'll see how long it takes, but the ride is pretty exciting. Like, I've seen so much change, and I have had so much corroboration of all these things that I had downloaded over the years, and all these things that I've been talking about for years, that, like, it's like, I can no longer, with a shadow of a doubt, think that all that was my imagination, because so much has come to pass. This time of shifting that we're in now, people waking up, it's like we're in the thick of it. It's not even like 2012 was like, everything feels like it's shifting, sure, but on the surface, like, everything's the same. Society's still running the same, but now, after COVID, the world shutting down, nothing will be the same. It's just not the same as it was. People are shifting jobs, people are shifting where they live, people are making massive shifts that they weren't prepared to make 10, 11 years ago. And that's just because, we're still upcycling.
I feel like 2012 was like a sort of like birthing of, in a sense, like, I feel like it was a turning point for a lot of people. I went through a sort of a major shift at that time as well, but I feel like that was a turning point for a decent amount of people to almost like wake them up. Like, it was like waking them from the dream, essentially. Like, I feel like that was a big part of it. I mean, our big transition in 2012, believe it or not, there were actually people within government of like FEMA and different places who had no idea what was going to happen in 2012. And a lot of them obviously have been studying it for a very long time. And there was enough of it out there to where I had gone to regional meetings out in Boston when I was like really deep into emergency management and a whole bunch of other stuff with some pretty higher up people, and talking with some of these guys. They were like, yeah, we totally think something's going to happen in December of 2012. We just don't know what. So we're just all kind of just getting ready that something might hit the fan. Are we going to have a pole shift? Are we going to have like Yellowstone volcano go off? Like, we have no idea what's going to go on, but we're all just pretty much of the agreement that something's going to happen. Of course, nothing did, but
I think it did. Sorry,
like that catastrophic.
Well, I think we had, and this is a personal belief, take it with a grain of salt, but I think there were buffers in place to help us so that we didn't, because we weren't ready, as a collective. We would have, if we flipped the switch and went through basically what we went through in 2020 on, if that just happened instantaneously without the gradual buildup of that decade or 8 years in between, I feel like we would have torn ourselves apart. But I've torn ourselves apart because we collectively, even though individually some of us might have thought we were prepared for it, who knows in reality, because we didn't have to. But I don't think we were prepared, and I think there were buffers in place, and those helped us to integrate these shifting energies to a point where we were able to upcycle enough. And then at some point in the past 5 years, I think those were completely removed. So now we're actually in it for real. Whereas in 2012, we had a little bit of external help, as in some buffers. And that's something that I had a strong feeling of. And I know there was other people out there that had information about things like that actually in our galaxy, massive orbs that were helping with that. You know, whatever, like I said, take it with a grain of salt, but that's my belief. And I feel like now we're in it. We're hitting it raw.
Yeah. I mean, what a kind of exciting time to be alive, though. Like I don't want to say I'm not intuitive, because I'm trying to get away from like any of that self-defeating talk. Like I just historically have never been a very intuitive person, but the limited amount of intuition that I feel like I have right now tells me that we are in the midst of some sort of a massive shift that is going to happen with humanity. Like I feel like all of us are here at this time. I just hope that shift is not the massive reset that I feel like has happened on this planet several times. Like I've done enough studying. I'm smart enough to where I've rubbed elbows with enough people and listened to enough talks and seen the evidence myself of how it does appear that we've had a way advanced civilization beyond people in caves 13,000 years ago. You know, there's architecture, there is so much stuff that's coming to light that mainstream academia tried their damnedest to keep the wraps on, but they haven't been able to, with information, and people just don't care anymore. They're just whistleblowers everywhere. There's just so much information that has come out that has proven to me beyond a reasonable doubt that our history is nowhere near what we thought it was. You know, the Sphinx is way older than we thought it was. That's been 150% proven. Just the architecture and pure mastery of some ancient buildings that they still cannot to this day explain how they cut precision and moved things that heavy. We still can't do it with what we have today. So explain that shit. Like you can't.
Yeah, and the fact that the most advanced stuff is from the furthest timeline back. The most advanced, amazing structures that are still standing, the largest, most massive stones, are from the earliest history. Yeah. And, you know, I have my own beliefs about that, and I've had lots of downloads about that. That would be another whole episode. But
it'll be the next one. It'll be part 5.
But yeah, I believe that we were, you know, definitely part of a much more advanced civilization at that time. I mean, I think we did touch on this when we were talking about galactic cycles. I know we touched on this, like we were at a place, but I also think that we came here from another place to seed and to continue working on the lessons that we get from being at this level of density of reality, of being able to step in, totally forget our greater selves, our higher selves, our connection to our oversoul, and step in blind and basically run all these experiments. Like, what's going to happen if we put a whole bunch of people in here in whatever scenario with a whole bunch of NPCs going down Brandon's road. Yeah. A whole bunch of NPCs and a bunch of lizard turds they're going to direct them and try to make them do all this stuff to harvest negative energy. What'll happen in 200 years sitting with that, or 12,000 years or whatever, you know? I mean, who knows? But I have my beliefs, and I've had memories of different things, of ancient civilizations, of different civilizations on different planets. And there's so much more to our history far beyond this planet than meets the eye. And I think that we're starting to awaken to that. And I feel like Project Bluebeam might be a a look over here distraction. Hey, look at the silly monkey. Look at these
Yeah.
aliens.
Yeah.
Rather than waking up to the fact that we're part of a massive galactic civilization that goes back billions of years, part of an overall collective of cosmic cousins, to use Corey Good's terms, of civilizations that have been cross-pollinating and moving through sections of the galaxy or the universe. I don't even know how far it goes. I mean, the universe is pretty large if it's infinite. That's not even comprehensible. But there's, how many playgrounds are there? And is it like, we're still trying to understand it from the perspective of almost being like a video game, like a simulation kind of perspective. And I think that's the closest analogy that we're going to get at the moment, at least me. I'm not like a super scientific person, although I love it. I did take Nassim Haramehn's course when it first took out about the unified science and all that, which was amazing. I highly recommend. I think it's actually free now, as of several years ago. So that's out there free. I was on the very first version that was the paid version where we got to sit in a call with Nassim every week. And that guy, to me, is fascinating.
He is brilliant.
He's brilliant. He just released something. I haven't even watched it yet, but there was a video where it seems like they're taking another step. And that's talking about the applied sciences of all this higher consciousness, higher dimensional technology that's going to start seeing the light of day. I think that may be one of the first steps. But, that's what I'm choosing to believe. Sometimes the world is so convoluted. Sometimes it feels like I don't know what to believe anymore. And I'm okay with that. I don't latch on and need anything to be one way. I'm willing to work with a lot of different things and see what comes up out of that, and still being able to, I've come to the place where I'm quite fine working with belief systems that are totally contradictory, because, if it comes down to it and it's all arising out of consciousness, then why can't we have contradictory things in creation if we can have contradictory thoughts?
Yeah, it's true. If you think of the fact that there's a lot of evidence that shows that consciousness is fundamental, and obviously the dual slit experiments and all those kind of things proved it to a certain extent. It definitely is. The way that the particles move in this universe is dependent on the observer, a conscious observer. So, if things are emergent from our consciousness, that's a fascinating concept. Granted, it's hard for anybody to conceive. And when they hear me describe this, I've gotten into debates with people in this thing that I'm about to describe. And they're just kind of like, yeah, but that doesn't make any sense because I'm here. So let's paint the picture that in a dream, just say tonight, I go to sleep and I have a dream about us having a conversation on this podcast right now. I'm sitting in the same spot. You're up on my screen. All this stuff's going on. You and I have a fascinating conversation. You, the one I'm talking to right now, you have no recollection of it because I literally made the entire environment, the conversation we're having, and you, Ben Carroll, were all figments of my imagination. So if you take the micro and the macro and you literally paint our consciousness as a higher form up above this, who is literally having a form of a dream, you have no idea if that's actually happening. And it's been proven when they've studied people's brainwaves and dreams that a dream that could seem to you to last the course of an hour, right? It can happen in as short as maybe 2 to 3 minutes in actual timeframes measured outside of your dream state. Your dream state shows that your brain was active in some sort of weird way for a couple minutes. But when you come out and be like, hey, what were you dreaming about? And they've done these studies, it was this long drawn out dream. So these people have these long drawn out dreams. Well, what if our higher state of consciousness can literally dream 75, 100 years worth of a lifetime that you and I are perceiving right now in the blink of whatever, cosmic blink of their cosmic eye of whatever they're living through in a different state of consciousness. I've heard all of these. This is nothing I'm making up, but this is something that I've heard of that bakes your noodle and just makes you think oh my God. So if the world I'm living in right now is running experiments to show that everything around me is dependent on a conscious observer, am I literally here? We have these concepts of manifestation and laws of attraction. Is that all true? Because I am literally creating every bit of the reality that is here. The way that the symphony of life blends from one thing to the next sometimes is a little bit creepy. And I don't know about this has happened to you lately. I've gone from the 111 and the 222, like all those things that came up on the clock. It's been happening for a few years. Once you become aware of a lot of the angel numbers and you hear people talk about philosophies like that, you'll start to see those numbers on the clock. And then eventually you'll see them so much, you're like, what does it mean? Why am I seeing these numbers all the time? Right. And then it's gone so far from me all the way up to, I have a lucky number that pops up for me all over the place. I see it all the time. Well, it's shifted from the numbers first to that lucky number. Then it led into like songs. Like I'd be thinking of something and a song would come on that references what I'm literally thinking about. To right now, at this current point, over the last few months, I will literally have either something being said by someone in the room in a conversation or something, and my eyes will literally land on the word they're saying at the moment they're saying it, just randomly. That has started to happen. And I've heard different philosophical talks about that like that is the synchronicities are deviation syncs. Like we quantify our existence of thinking about everything I'm talking about consciousness being emergent and everything. We talked about it in the terms of a simulation, because that's just the way that our brains will quantify what's really happening here, because it's just way too complex. But we know how a simulation works. A computer runs it, a programmer makes it, and a little character runs through a simulation, doesn't really realize it's there. Or maybe it does, but it's so real, sometimes you get lost in it. You put on a VR headset and sometimes you run into a wall because you don't realize you're there. So, if you think about it, like all of those concepts and all of that wrapped up into this package of like, what is our existence really, and where does it begin and where does it end? And are we really creating all of this in our own sort of way? And if we are, I was talking about deviation things. So like the more we break away from a program, we stop caring about our 9-to-5 jobs. We stop caring about the career path that somebody else says we should be on. And we break away from the humdrum program that we're used to being into every single day. That's when some of those synchronizations happen, because that's really highly abnormal that you would look at a clock and it would be on that exact time, or that your favorite number would pop up, or that as someone's saying a word, your eye gets fixated on it on a billboard as you're driving by it or something, and the person in the car says the word happy, and there it is on the billboard right when they said the word. That's really atypical and it's really abnormal. But the more you break away from the program, you are becoming that abnormality. So therefore you are attracting more abnormalities. And that's like, I guess, the universe's way of kind of like showing you keep doing what you're doing. And then when they become more profound, it's almost like you're becoming more of a magnet for those, and you're maybe manifesting things closer to the moment. Like you're actually getting better at attracting those things. Like keep on the road that you're on is basically what the road sign's saying when you hit that point. So I've heard that and I'm like, okay, it's worth a shot, like let's stay on the road. Let's swerve within those lanes, but don't hit the guardrail.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had just as many amazing synchronistic experiences, numbers, the same exact thing you were talking about with reading a word at the same time someone says it. I've experienced that more than a couple times. And also something that happened to me, this was around 2014 when I was having crazy energetic experiences. I think it was started happening before I had the really, really crazy experience. But I would randomly think of something, and it would be something small, not like anything crazy. But one time, I remember like just thinking, and it's not like I'm focusing on it and like that, but like my mom's looking for her mittens so we can leave. And I go downstairs and my mom was looking for her mittens so we could leave, which is like totally random. It's not like something that happens all the time, but so many little things like that. Like I don't remember specifically because they were so like day-to-day normal things, but I would think about the exact same thing that would happen very close to immediately after, within a couple minutes. And that I went through a cycle of that happening a lot for a period of a couple weeks. And it was crazy. But numbers, the number thing, yeah, and that's still crazy. And it always happens when I'm driving to my sound healing journey work events. I always don't just see like some repeating numbers. I remember one time, and this was when I was still in Maine because I haven't been doing a lot of in-person events. I remember one time I saw a series of license plate. I think there was like 4 in a row where it was like it was 2 to 4 digits of like 2222, 3333, 44444, 55555. And it was like 4 freaking cars in a row. And it's like, that is amazing. But I've also experienced this so much that I'm just like, thank you. And like, yeah, you're like, yeah, thanks. I'm on the right road. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, I actually had that happen the other day. And
nice.
As you're saying that, I don't think you're gonna be able to see this. So I'm gonna put this up to my camera real quick, but I'm gonna see if I can okay, look at the mileage.
Oh yeah.
And then the mileage on the trip right above it, and then the time.
Yep. And then the time.
So the mileage was 3333. The trip mileage was 444.9, and then the time was 555. I just happened to look down at the thing at that time, and so I'm like trying not to crash the car. I'm like, I have to get a picture of this. This is the craziest synchronicity. So
I've had some of those too with synchronicities. Let me see if I can pull them up really quick. My Instagram stories, but like that was just a cool one with getting gas. It just stops there if you can read that.
Yeah, 44.
Like, and 1111.
Like what are the chances?
Yeah, the gas stopping there.
That's crazy. So your dollar.
And I had other ones coming up with. Look at this one, if you can see them all because they're really small.
No, it's kind of blurry.
All right. Well, I have. I guess if you're listening, anyways, you want to hear it. The time is 4:44. The battery percentage is 44. I have 444 people that I am following. I have 14.4 thousand followers, and I have 1,044 posts. It's in my stories on Instagram. That was like
crazy.
That was crazy. But yeah, for a little while I was having 1s and 4s like that with the gas, and until it got really strong, like those ones that are in my stories, because that's crazy when it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. That's
just remember being at the point where I was like, what does it mean? And I've had somebody who was, very deep into spirituality basically say, like, it means whatever you want it to mean. That's actually, to go back real quick, and we got to wrap up soon because we're almost on the 2-hour mark, but we're not done talking. So whenever it ends, it ends. I had a friend who, was basically like, it's going to mean whatever you want it to mean. And then when I recently have sat in moments of clarity, and that's another thing I wanted to ask you about, we sit in these moments where we like recluse from people, or we meditate and we get those moments of clarity, and people channeling or whatever else. I think those moments of clarity where you are sitting in silence, whether you're meditating, you're listening to a sound journey or whatever, if you speak out in some of those moments, or even sit in your car in silence and you're going through a thing in your life, if you just talk out loud and almost just wait for that silent response to come, you just say something out loud, and if an internal voice, whatever it is, says something back, like, continue that conversation. And I basically have said that before, like, what does it mean? And I got that same response. I had someone I trust very much spiritually tell me it means whatever you want it to mean. So stop asking some external source for what those number synchronicities mean. So I had that same reaction. I basically had that same response when I've said, like, I saw something. I'm like, what does it mean? And it was like, what do you want it to mean? What are you thinking about right now? And what do you want it to mean to remind you of something significant? Like, it's going to mean what you want it to mean. So stop trying to figure out, like, why am I seeing these synchronicities? What is it? What is this all about? Like, sit in the silence and see if you can feel what it's all about, because no one's going to pop out of the glove compartment and be like, it's about this. Like, it's about stop being an asshole to your kids because you're not breaking the generational curses of the stuff that you carried into this life, and you need to teach them better so they don't do this to their kids. There's not going to be a profound answer like that, but maybe that profound answer is going to come from sitting in those moments of silence.
Yeah. And so hearing you say all these things, and something you mentioned maybe a half hour ago, talking about not having a strong intuition, dude, you're doing fine. You got a hell of an intuition. Are you listening?
That's the key. Are
you
very
listening? True. Starting to see the numbers is the first step. Asking questions and receiving answers. I alluded to that just briefly at the very beginning of this about when I was a teenager, how I started having these downloads where it was like a conversation. I was asking questions and getting answers and getting a lot of information, a lot of teachings, which at the time I didn't tell anybody about because I'd never heard anything about it. Channeling was so far not on the radar. Like I just took it and I looked for a lot of corroboration over the years. I spent a lot of time scouring the metaphysical section of the bookstore because AOL was all there was for the internet, and there was
true. Yeah.
there was nothing on there. And then, coming back to my reawakening, a big part of my practice, and I have a lot of blog posts like this. I don't take nearly as much time to do it as I used to because I'm focused on different things. I'm focused on definitely less words and more holding vibrational resonance. It's just where I'm at. Nothing wrong with either way. But for a while, I was asking questions out loud and writing down the answers and even writing down the questions. And there's a lot of my blog posts from 2017 and 2018 on my blog website, Inner Self Sustained, that are that. And I would scribble like so fast, and I didn't allow myself to think about it, because what you're probably doing is like getting an answer and like, what does that mean? Is that true? Rather than, I highly suggest what you do is ask the question, notate what comes through without judgment, scribble it down, type it out, speak to text, whatever you got to do to get it down without worrying about if it makes any sense. Read it back. And I've had my mind blown. Like there's some blog posts on my website, which are pretty advanced information that are far beyond where I'm at myself right now, like about the nature of reality and the holographic universe and vibration and resonance, and questions I used to ask and get answers to. I can't say it's 100% true because who the hell knows? But the answers were way more intense and way more eloquent than just some random scribbles. By not thinking about it and just allowing it to flow, I was receiving my own answers. I don't feel like I was channeling. I don't feel like I was channeling other beings. I don't think I do that. I work with some energies, which is a story for another day, of other beings. But as far as information goes, I'm very connected to my own higher self. I stepped into this place to do this work, and I came in and I had a walk-in experience with my higher self when I was 17 years old, which is that blog post I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that I released in the fall. Very intense, world shattering. My first Dark Night of the Soul experience happened in August of 1994, not 2004.
Wow.
1994, very intense experience. That's when I started getting the downloads of information as conversations in my head. I wrote a really long blog post about it. It was a very lonely time in my life because I couldn't find any corroborating information. I'd go to the metaphysical section of the bookstore and try to find corroboration. And I looked for corroboration for years. Eventually, I decided I just drive myself crazy. I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life and fucking do it, because I was driving myself crazy with all this stuff. So I was like, all right, I'm going to give music a go. Within a year, I was a rock star.
Yeah.
And then 10 years later, I lived that life for 10 years, drinking alcohol, which shuts down your intuition, for me anyways. And then stopped touring, stopped drinking, because drinking was only for me ever a means of being able to handle the energy of people, because I always been highly empathetic. Just taking on other people's energy. In high school, I had to sit. I used to a lot of times go and eat my lunch in the library, sneak crackers out of my pocket and eat crackers in the library for my lunch, because I just couldn't handle being in that space with all that energy. In retrospect, that's what I think. Not that I didn't have friends. I just couldn't take it, like that energy bouncing around. And, but yeah, so I lost my train of thought. I had an amazing point. What was I just saying? What was I talking about? This is what I was talking about.
Tuning in your intuition.
Oh, tuning in your intuition. Yeah, so I was going off on a tangent. Anyways, that's why I lost my train of thought. Tuning in your intuition. If you are not paying attention and not willing to not judge, then your intuition is right there telling you something. You're just like, you basically, someone says essentially like, prove it. Let me look it up on Google. I don't trust you. Whereas if you just allow it to come through first, you'll be, at least personally, I was amazed at there's dozens of blogs. In 2018 is when I was very prolific with blog posts. I was posting multiple blog posts every month. These days, I'm lucky if I get out a half a dozen in a year, because I just don't do words I'm not called to as much. But it's right there. You just have to work with it. And I these days I've been doing a lot of coaching for intuitive sound healing. And a part of what I'm after, a decade plus of working on this, I've been taught practices and I've been teaching these practices. And one of them is a practice for awakening your intuition and utilizing sound in a way where you just totally tune into a sound, whether it's, like a tuning fork is what I always use. So just like taking that tuning fork, tuning into the tuning fork, allowing everything else. That's just a way. Sound has a really powerful way of shutting down the brain, which a lot of people have probably experienced with sound baths and whatnot, but utilizing it on yourself with something as simple as a tuning fork or as a single singing bowl, tuning into that, and then allowing yourself just to let things come up or start asking questions, get from that space of shifting your brainwave state, and amazing things can start to happen. But yeah, I have a practice that I work on with people. That's number one. First minutes of my coaching sessions is dive right into that practice, because that is the birth of all of not only my blog posts but my work with sound. It was all. I call what I do intuitive sound healing, because it's working with intuition, allowing the sound to happen. And that's what I do. I don't sit down beyond some basic structures that I have to do when I'm doing an online event, because I have to plan out specific sounds I want for different scenes, so to say, throughout the event. It's all just allowing myself to step out of the way and allow what comes out to come out. And the first step is just listening for a melody in my head and singing it back. And from there, it's almost like complete channeling. When I'm really in the zone, it's just happening, just flowing. And it is like channeling, but like I said, I don't feel like I'm channeling anybody else except for myself, my higher self. But intuition is so powerful and such an intrinsic part of who we are as human beings. Every single one of us has a massive connection to intuition. Why did we not get on the highway when there was a big accident? Whether or not you're intentionally listening to it or not, it is always there. It starts showing up as numbers, and then it starts showing up as words. And then if you start listening and asking questions, that's the key. You start asking questions, you're going to start getting some answers that might freak you the fuck out, or at least like excite you. Like, I didn't get freaked out. I was like, this is awesome. And yeah, but I'm not special. We all have that. And part of this time, this period of awakening, with the veil thinning and the frequency of this planet and our consciousness expanding, we have a much greater level of connection to that. And that's only going to increase. That's why all of a sudden, so like back in 2011, I discovered The Secret, right? And then I discovered Esther Hicks.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is cool. Someone's like channeling. I never heard of channeling.
Right.
Like nothing else out there about it. And I used to live in the metaphysical section of the bookstore, like I told you, in the 90s. So it was 10 years, 20 years. Well, I guess that was 10 years before. And I never, ever bumped into any channeled material. And there was a little out there. There was like the Law of One, there was the Seth material, and there was some other stuff, but I never found it. I discovered Esther Hicks, like within days. I discovered Bashar, and then boom, there's all these people channeling. And that was like within like a couple, no, we'll call it a year from like 2011 when I discovered The Secret to discovering Esther Hicks, which was probably a couple months later. So I found out she had been actually cut out of it. So I went and watched the original. Like, someone was cut out. I got to watch and see why did they cut her out? And then discover.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, she was in the original Secret. And then from that, I discovered her. And from her, I discovered Bashar. And from Bashar, it was just like floodgates. And then all of a sudden, everybody's channeling on all these social media channels. There's millions of people channeling.
Yeah.
Is that because we're being activated, or is that because I activated it in my personal little sliver of the universe that's happening through my own little double slit experiment?
Right. Seriously though, you wonder all that stuff. I can tell you, when you were talking a few minutes ago about how, the sound can sort of put your brain in certain states. I still go back to that breathwork session up in Maine when we went up there. And, for those of you that didn't hear that episode, I went up to Maine to go see Ben and Janine. Me and my wife did. And Ben was doing an event. I think it was on a Friday night. We spent the weekend up there. And on a Friday night, Ben was doing a sound healing event at a, I don't even call that place that it was at.
It's like a wellness center kind of place.
Yeah, like a wellness center. Yep. And it was a sound healing event in the midst of a breathwork session. So like they did the breathwork first, and then Ben did his stuff right afterwards. If you've never done a holotropic breathwork, it's crazy. Like I've never done psychedelics, and that's the closest thing that I can think of to just literally my mind was just bugging out. Like I was seeing shapes and whatever, and then Ben started a sound healing right after the breathwork session happened. And my wife had such an intense experience. Like she actually had to leave the session. One of the facilitators had to take her out just because she started having just a whole body reaction. I did too. But once I got done, I was literally like trying to hold in belly laughs. I'm just laying on my back laughing because I had no idea what the hell I'd just gone through. And then Ben gets into the sound healing stuff, which hopefully all you guys who are listening, we'll put some of the stuff in the show notes about how you can see Ben's events, because if Ben's not doing a whole lot of in-person stuff. And even when he does, it's obviously going to be sort of regional. But if you can do a sound healing event where you put on some big chunky headphones like I have right now, or even my sound setup in my den that I have right now, whenever you do an event, I've got a pretty awesome setup with some really high frequency speakers, some low frequency ones. And it does a great job. So me and my wife can like lay on the middle of the floor in the mid of this nice triangulated sound area, and it's great. But sometimes I'll just put on the headphones. Oh my God, if you guys can do that and have that experience of just those pure tones, there's nothing like it. And on top of that, me and my conspiracy mind, the way that they do different compressions and stuff like that on YouTube, if you go and listen to a sound healing thing, if you listen to Hemi Sync or binaural beats on like a YouTube, or even anything that they put out there for sale, you have the chance of it being manipulated. I'll tell you right now, Ben Carroll is not sitting in his studio manipulating the sound waves that are coming through. Like the stuff that I got to see in person and the different types of reactions I've had during the sound healing events are just unparalleled. So that's my plug for you, my friend, because those are what I'll turn to as a trusted source of something to put on. Because I'm very sensory oriented. If I've got my eyes closed and I'm meditating and somebody walks by the window and I see a shadow go by, I will be in it deep. But if I see that through my eyelids, I will come right out of it, no matter how deep meditation I'm in. So when I have your stuff on, it's probably one of the only times that I'm able to just get really deep down into a meditation. And it's definitely an experience that if you guys haven't done it, do it. Give it at least a shot or two. And sometimes Ben does some free events, which is a great way to segue into whatever you might have coming up sometime soon. I'm not sure. I think you just did one this past weekend, didn't you?
Well, these days, online events, I do 2 per month.
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
So I always have one coming up.
That's right.
Yeah. But yeah, the sound work is really, really potent. And, that's, at least at this point in time, who knows what this amazing future is going to hold as we keep cycling up. But at least this point in time, this is why I'm here. I was called to step in and do this work to help people with integrating these higher frequencies. And it's not me like doing it for you. It's me facilitating a way for the sound I feel like helps us to shift our state of consciousness where we are able to do these things for ourselves. But when we come together and do it with a group, I pretty much exclusively work with groups, online or in person. That energy of people focusing on things together, and I always work with an intention, definitely massively amplifies it. That goes back to my work pre-sound, like when I was talking about working on intentionally shifting timelines, working in groups with groups of people facing a similar direction, which is why I always work with intentions. That's the secret to shifting timelines. Mm-hmm. That in altered states of consciousness, quote unquote altered, because we've been deemed it's necessary to live within this very narrow parameter of where we're functionally able to go and work in someone else's factory. Like that's the acceptable place. You can be from here to here. Anything else, you're fucking crazy, and we're gonna have to lock you up. Yeah. But when we learn to access different states of consciousness and do so in groups, it's extremely powerful. And I'm not talking about psychedelics because I personally don't do them. I don't need them. I do not knock them whatsoever in any way because I think they can be an extremely powerful tool for altered states of consciousness, also for trauma release, PTSD release, and all that stuff. So I am all for them. I personally just feel like I don't need them. I can go so deep, and I've had so many amazing experiences with sound, with holotropic breath work, with just being the weird way I interface in this reality and all the energetic experiences that I've had. Like I don't need psychedelic drugs because I can already usually get there. And if I'm not supposed to be there, I'm not going to be there. And I think for me, taking psychedelics would be like trying to force the door a little bit. I don't need to do that. I need to be processing. So that's where I'm at personally, but I don't knock them. I don't know why I had to go off on that tangent because I'm all for it. If that's what you're called to do, I think they're extremely beneficial, and it's about time that they're actually starting to get decriminalized with all the stuff, maps, and they're actually legal, I believe, now in Oregon, and that's how it started with marijuana. All it takes is one, and then every place else is like, oh, they're making money on that, and that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Unfortunately, but like the stuff that I've seen and heard, it's a great start. It's better than where we've been. It's better than putting people in jail who are just trying to get themselves help.
Yeah, that's the most ridiculous thing to go to jail for. Marijuana, psychedelics. I mean, and that goes back to the systems of control of our state of consciousness.
Absolutely.
Way too many rabbit holes to go down there, but I believe that we have been intentionally manipulated more so than just through societal program, but through specific forms of resonance. And I'm not just talking about 432, 440. I'm talking about technology that holds us in lower resonant states, and they're trying to keep us down, unaffected from the higher frequencies that are coming in. It's not going to work, and it's not working, but I believe that's been going on for quite some time in so many different ways, from physical technology all the way down to television programming and all that stuff. It's and I sound all dark, like I'm getting militant, psychological warfare, but at the same time, I'm like,
true.
It's true.
It is
at
true.
The same time, I'm not connected to it and like fighting against it. I'm just living my life and opening up and moving around it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
You're able to sidestep it. Like you can be aware of the battle, but you don't actually have to ride in with the sword and start swinging. Like you can kind of go around the battleground and let everybody else do it. And you can still get to the same place. You can get around the entire battle.
2012, one of my first blog posts on my website was about waking up and realizing that we're in a world where any type of revolution, I'm losing my ability to speak slowly. Any type of revolution that we have in this period of time that turns violent is not going to work, because we're at a point where there's such high levels of military technology that will be instantly crushed and is totally ineffective. The only way that we can have an effective revolution at this point in time is by shifting our state of consciousness. And that is my first blog post, I believe, on Inner Self-Sustained from like October of 2012.
But how relevant now? How relevant is that statement now? Because so many people are like, we got to revolt, we got to do something, we got to push back against the powers that be.
That's what I am doing. That's what I see myself as doing, is I'm helping to facilitate the revolution. There's so many people that are doing that in so many ways, yourself included, with this podcast, talking about these ideas, getting people to listen to them, to resonate with them, to feel like they're not alone, and therefore open themselves up to this so that they're actually growing that resonance. That is the revolution that will change the world, and it is well underway.
Let's go.
We're a decade plus in, and things are shifting, and we are winning, and that's why we're at a point right now where they're like, I don't know what the fuck to do. Let's give them aliens.
Let's give them aliens.
That's the last ditch effort.
It is.
Project Bluebeam.
What's higher than that? There's really nothing much higher than that. But your influence, I got to say, I've told you several different times, but your influence from the very beginnings, where you mentioned it earlier, probably an hour ago, because we're at hour number 2. I think this is hands down the longest episode. So congratulations for that one.
Oh, damn.
The point in your life where you ended up going down a certain road, and, you talked about, I don't care who judges it or whatever, but it took you some time to get there. I remember being one of those people where I'm like, what is Ben Carroll doing now? Like, you'd posted some stuff and it was like way out there, different than you've ever done, but it's not like I thumbed down my nose on it, it was just kind of like, what is he talking about? Like, wow, this stuff is pretty far out there. And then you look at it and you're like, this is some fascinating shit. And you did it around 2014, which is funny because it was actually
2012. Because the funny story is, I started Inner Self Sustained, which was my blog and a Facebook page called Inner Self Sustained, where I started sharing all these words. I started it in October of 2012, unbeknownst to me at the time, on the same exact day that Ra's first album was released, exactly 10 years later.
Whoa. That's crazy.
Just a weird synchronicity, talking about synchronicities.
That's a crazy synchronicity.
1 year, exactly 1 year later from the day that Ra's first and biggest album was released, which was a major life-changing thing for me, going from sleeping on a couch with roaches crawling on me to living in a tour bus and living the dream. And then exactly 10 years later to the day is the day I start that website.
Just completely unplanned, though.
Unplanned. Didn't even realize it until many years later when Facebook memories were like, oh, here's a memory from one came out. Oh, here's another memory. Inner Self-Sustained. Like, oh, shit. That was the same day.
That's crazy. Yeah. I remember there was this one day, I can literally remember the first time I ever heard Raw. It was in Hadley, Massachusetts. I was in the car and 107.3 AAF was on. Mistress Carey was playing the song and Do You Call My Name came on. And I remember we were pulling up to a store and my wife was getting out of the car and I'm like, hang on, I got to finish this song. It was the first time I ever heard it and absolutely loved it, which is crazy because Raw's breakthrough song, it caught my eye. I beat many people up in the ring over that song. Like that was my fired up song and stuff. And then, that there were other songs on the album that were a little bit more potent. Sky was one of them. And then the subsequent albums of just so much different stuff led to different time periods in my life that Raw just became such a significant influence in my life. But then just having Raw as an awareness and influence, I dove into, I followed you. And then I dove shortly after you started talking about some spiritual concepts. It led into people like Corey Good and I'm trying to have Greg Braden, some of those great teachers of the metaphysical stuff. Immediately got into the law of one material. Like something just popped up one time and it was like Raw, the law of one material. And I'm like, the hell's this? So I got deep into it. And I can't tell you, Ben, that was one of probably the first sort of metaphysical spiritual things that I started to really dive into deeply. And I'm not sure what it was about the words because it's really clunky. I don't know how much you've dug into the law of one.
I've read the first book more than once and I've never read book. It's like so dense.
It's so clunky.
It's amazing, but you need like a microscope.
Yeah,
and it's basically tweezers to get the pieces together.
Yeah,
it's amazing though.
It is amazing. There's a facilitator and somebody who's channeling the material, and they just did this over, I want to say 5-6 years or something like that. They just continued these conversations.
Something like that, yeah.
It was 40 books or something, like some crazy amount of books.
Well, it's 4 books.
4 books.
Three or 4 books.
Yep. But that material came out. I can't tell you how much it resonated when I first read the law of one stuff. And I'm just kind of like, wow, for some reason, this person who is channeling the material could be completely full of shit. Like they're fully conscious. They're just making this shit up. Yeah. They could have been faking that they were out, but they were completely out. And everybody vouches for that whole thing.
And there was information that was corroborated after the fact that shouldn't, ties into information that shouldn't have been known. And it's really, really potent. And some other amazing synchronicities is, well, first of all, as a kid, I used to have dreams of someplace that looked like ancient Egypt all the time, recurring dreams. One where I was recurring many times, chased by giant scarab beetles, but always in an Egyptian theme. And I mean, post 2014, after all that crazy upcycling, I've had memories of different civilizations that I would pieces of lifetimes that I remembered. That's another whole massive can of worms. But I always felt a tie to Egypt, and eventually I realized it was actually the time before Egypt. The more ancient civilizations, antediluvian civilizations, which was a word that the first time I heard that, I was like, it stopped me dead in my tracks. It was some kind of trigger that was implanted into me, antediluvian, that word changed my life. Just reading it once in I think it might have been in a Carl Jung book, because I was way into Carl Jung in my in my late teens, because who isn't when they're late teens? And
antediluvian
that word
means
antediluvian, I was like,
pre-flood, right?
what the hell? Like, so I looked it up, and it's before the Great Flood.
Yeah.
It's the time before the Great Flood. And I started, I had all these dreams when I was a kid of like that some kind of Egyptian type civilization, only different. And I believe it was more than one civilization, one on this planet and some on another planet. Again, we're going off the deep end there, so we'll talk about that another day. But so I always had a pull to Egyptian stuff. And when I joined the band Ra, that was like, it was like one of the signs, like, all right, because Ra was kind of already a band. I mean, they were like a local band. So it's not like they were selling millions of records, but they were a local band based out of New Jersey. And I had just, the band I was in had just broken up, which again was a local band. And I was just trying to find a singer that was really good. And I found this band called Ra, and it was really just one guy, and it was Sahaj, who's the singer for Ra. And but the name was like that was one of the big reasons where I was like, I knew that was my gig. I was like, when I went down to get that, just because of the name, I was like, that's my gig. Because of that ties. And then, so we recorded our whole first album under a pyramid. We built a pyramid in the studio.
That's crazy. I remember hearing about that. That was nuts.
Yeah, which is interesting. And it's also interesting, all this David Wilcock type of information that I've read about pyramid structures after that, just makes it interesting. And that's our album that did the best. But then come 2012, I discovered the Raw material, which is called The Law of One, and Ra's first album was called From One. It was just, it was just like more synchronicities that like pointed me towards that information.
That just blew my mind, though. It goes I think I asked Sahaj about that. I'm like, did you have any influence with the Law of One? He's like, no, like, he's definitely not into some of the stuff that we talk about, but that's too much of a synchronicity for me right there. It's like, seriously, the name of the band is Raw, and you name the album From One. But the Law of One material, the stuff that came out all that time from before, he's like, no, because it was because the original album was just one. It was just Raw. The name of the album was One, and then it evolved. It was just the EP. It was just a few tracks, and then From One was the reason why I call it From One. But it was just like, what the heck? It's just the odds of that kind of stuff just blow my mind.
Yeah. Sahaj is. There's definitely a lot of depth there, but he's very focused on. He's very focused on what he's doing as far as the technical side of things with music, which is working for him. So good for him. He's not a shallow guy though, but yeah,
he's a brilliant dude. He's definitely not a shallow guy. We've had,
at least not in the past 20 years, he hasn't been diving deep down those rabbit holes. I don't think.
His episode he did on here was pretty amazing. He, like, some of the stuff he came out with, and I've listened to other episodes that he's done elsewhere, and I tried to get him to dive deep. We were talking music stuff and everything, but I tried to like uncover the surface. I'm kind of waiting for the next album or whatever he does to like get him back on so I can dive a little deeper. Like, hey, tell me about the music. All right, let's dive some deep shit,
Yeah. He's a good dude who I've known for almost half my life at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, very synchronistic for me. Like, and yeah, there's a whole pile of information that I don't want to get into, but it all ties back into the blog post. This is the third time I referenced it, that I posted back in November, which was information. So I released a series of blog posts in 2017, 2018. And when it came time to release this information, I like stopped. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So it was like literally like 4 years later that I actually released the next installment in my story. And it goes pretty deep into some of that stuff. I think it's my memory, so I don't remember what the hell I wrote about it, as much as I could at the time anyways.
But
yeah, life is a strange and exciting trip when you allow it to be. This is such a beautiful place to be when you can be in the moment, set down all the anxieties of the future and all the horrible things, the quote unquote horrible things in the past that brought you to where you are. And just being here at this time of shifting is such a amazing thing. I think we got the tickets to the Super Bowl, and here we are. It's the big game, and we're better than that, I think we're actually, there's a lot of us, we're the ones actually playing the game. We're here, whether it's some big nefarious game, which I don't think. I think we just set this self up for ourselves to just see. I don't like calling it tests. A lot of people call it tests, but I don't think it's tests. It's not like there's a wrong answer, because even if we distort ourselves, I don't think that's a wrong answer. It's experiential. We're here to experience. But if we can open up and come into this amount of density, this amount of forgetting who we truly are, and still work our way back to that remembering and coming back to expanding our consciousness to the point where we can realign with the higher states of ourselves, the higher states of consciousness, and realign with as close as we can get in this form to the infinite love that is actually what we are. That is the ultimate win. There's no wrong answer, and there's no real loss. But I think that's like the grand experiment. Like, can we put ourselves into this much density, this much strife, having this long history of warfare and hatred and bigotry and greed, and get to the point where we can shift our consciousness enough to shift our state of resonance to move into a higher state of being while we're here, without tearing ourselves apart. And we are at the pinnacle of that right now, or at least we're definitely rushing. We're rushing towards that target on the tip of the arrow.
It's true.
That's where we are. That's what we're doing. And it's pretty exciting, even though it can be horrifying at times if you get lost into the future and lost into the past with all the things that might happen and all the things that maybe have happened. But it's not that scary when you're in the moment and you remember just to breathe and feel how good it is to be alive, because we're here and we're doing something pretty crazy. We're on the forefront of an evolution of consciousness. Here we are.
Here we are. and if this whole entire human experiment, this huge human experience, has been building to a crescendo, we're closer now than we've ever been. So that's something to consider. And with great facilitators and teachers like you out there, there's many tools and many of us that start banding together, and that whole 100th monkey effect starts coming into play. And I mean, that's another verifiable scientific thing. So yep. We keep that momentum going, and it's inevitable, as Agent Smith would say. It's inevitable.
It's inevitable. The 100th monkey is just like the popcorn.
Yeah, that's right. All
popcorn,
right, my friend.
Made from sweet potatoes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So wonderful talking to you. I mean,
man. Great conversation.
We could do this for hours and hours and hours. Such a fun conversation. Such a pleasure to talk to you and just be here. And thank you for having me for time number 4 for an even deeper conversation.
And thank you for doing everything that you do. Thank you for the influence that you've been on me, because this podcast wouldn't exist if the whole symphony of how the past 20 years has worked out to where it is. And I'm honored to have crossed paths with you. And it's crazy, because I look at you as just Ben Carroll, the friend now. And sometimes I have to kind of like pinch myself, be like, this dude was the main guitarist, my favorite band ever. It
doesn't even feel like the same lifetime.
It literally doesn't feel like the same lifetime. And, but I'm definitely honored to be in this experience with you, my man.
Thank you. And let me just, if folks made it this far, let me just drop a couple things that I want to share. So I'm trying to get better at that. I'm horrible at self-promotion. I normally finish a podcast, I'm like, I don't want to say anything. But I have 2 online events every month, which are definitely high test, highly charged sound layered with binaural beats, singing bowls. And I do a lot of singing, and my voice is, from the feedback I get, seems to be very powerful for activating for a lot of people. And I absolutely love doing those. So please come join me for an event. I also, if you go to my website, I actually just launched a brand new website, which I haven't even officially launched yet. So this is like the first time I even mentioned it. I just built a whole website called soundhealsus.com for all my sound healing stuff, because Inner Self Sustained was always my blog. And then I started doing sound healing stuff, and I just kind of incorporated it into there, but I re-separated them, because now that I'm working towards online courses and all that stuff. But hold on, I'm like getting ahead of myself. We'll be here for another 2 hours. But But I also, with that, I'm doing coaching these days, which has been phenomenal, teaching people to activate themselves with sound. Whether you want to do sound just to activate yourself or you're actually a sound healer. I'm working with both types of people. And I also have a subscription service, which has been going on for a few months, where you get access to every single one of my events, as well as 2 calls a month. One is like a Q&A call, or it's generally some type of sound healing teaching, small stuff. And the other one, which I absolutely love, is a call which is just group toning, getting together and toning together, creating sound and vibration in the body. It's like a half-hour group toning call once a month. That is awesome. But yeah, and then a royalty-free library. But those 2 events per month, you get all that stuff with the subscription, the Sacred Sound Inner Circle. But yeah, check out my new website, soundhealsus.com. I'm excited. This is the first time I've ever told anybody it wasn't like one of my students or Janine.
And I know you've been working on it, so that's exciting that it's finally coming to fruition. I'm sure by the time this episode airs, in a few days, weeks, whenever it is, it'll be coming up soon. That'll be fully active. So we'll link that in the show.
It's live and fully active. I just haven't told anybody.
Been a well-kept secret.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you. And I hate self-promoting. So after I talk about myself, I'm like,
No, but the thing is that
I'm getting more comfortable doing it.
Yeah, you have to do it because not a lot of people they'll be followers, they'll enjoy what you do, but not a lot of people just have that savvy to promote. So you got to do it yourself for sure. And I'll tell you, everybody,
and I really, really believe in what I'm doing. Like I need to get this in front of more people because I feel it is really beneficial. It's why I'm here. So I feel like now is the time for growth because what I'm doing is well honed. I've been doing it for a decade. And I feel something big coming. Like we're talking about, something's coming. I don't know what it is, but we're in another shifting of patterns. So we're here, and I'm putting myself out there far better than I was capable of doing in 2012. Because in 2012, I was just trying to figure out what the fuck is going on.
Yeah.
Now I have a pretty good idea of what's going on. Like, what am I going to do to help? So it's a different place to be from. And here we are, doing what we can. You with this podcast, and yeah. So. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for everything you've done and everything you continue to do.
Always an amazing time chatting with Ben, hoping to see him a bit more regularly so we can dive into some of the writings that he's had over the years. Very profound stuff. Check out some of the things he was talking about at his blog at innerselfsustain.com and dive into some of the things he was kind of dropping some tidbits on. And head over to soundheals.us. I think he said it a little bit different on the episode, but it's soundheals.us. I'll link it in the show notes. Go join in for some of his live events, either online or in person. I know that he's starting to do live events again, but they are unlike anything you've ever experienced. I can definitely assure you that one. He's also diving into some retreats as well, just having his inaugural one in November of 2023. And I fully plan to get some of the ones that he's going to have going on in 2024, but those are in the works, so check those out as well. And lastly, I'm going to throw some love to Ben's partner, the amazingly talented artist Janine Burgess, who has created some of the works of art that I have in the background of the show from time to time, from sacred geometry designs and Sri Yantras to her newest wall calendar for 2024. So if you like some of what you've seen in the show, head on over to JanineBurgess.com to get some of your own. I've given many of these away as gifts because they are simply amazing, and she is an amazingly talented person. So head to that. I will put the link for that in the show notes as well. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time. Keep living.